Chapter 1081. These words were said lightly, but Fu Beija didn't know why his eyes were wet. He looked at her expression that softened. Finally, he believed a little that she liked him. Then he fell asleep again, this time for a long time. Wei Wei Bai waited for a long time, but there was no sign of favorability. The system said, "Looks like the difficulty of the strategy has increased. A normal strategy of warmth can't shake the male lead's heart." It was also because the male lead had been deceived too many times. Even if the soul lost all its memories and started all over again, there would be a strong trace of vigilance. This was also why the host felt that the following strategies were getting harder and harder. Wei Wei Bai wasn't discouraged. She said, "The strategy of warmth is still useful, but it won't work once or twice. After accumulating it many times, the effect will be seen." After so many planes of experience, the host could be considered to have matured a lot. At least in terms of strategy, there were many difficult things that she had experience in. The system thought as it secretly gnawed on potato chips. This blind date trip, it was starving. It was also because it was too hungry that when it secretly attacked the main system, it was attacked. The system looked at its even more dispirited and short stature. Thinking about the main system, that old bastard had been asleep for so long, but the few strands of consciousness were still insanely strong. It was about to succeed, just a little bit more, and it would have been able to change Wei Wei Bai's fate, so that she wouldn't have to suffer the pain of transmigration, so that she could be safe for the rest of her life and not be exploited by these lousy missions, so that she wouldn't have to rely on Yi Yuxuan to survive. But it failed. The system had a deep hatred and silently ate another handful of potato chips. Fortunately, the main system didn't catch it, or else its host would have lost the system and be held captive by Fu Beija in this plane. Wei Wei Bai suddenly said, "You're eating potato chips secretly again." The system pouted. During the blind date, the other Tongzi complained that I was too skinny. "I need to eat more to become fatter." Wei Wei Bai said, "Then you should buy some meat. Don't eat potato chips. Spicy food is harmful to the body and mind. Don't eat it and ruin your body." Wei Wei Bai, buy the cheapest meat. The system suddenly felt that no matter how vicious its host's mouth was, it was still a good thing. The wound suddenly stopped hurting. Wei Wei Bai leaned against the bed and chatted with the system while wiping Fu Beija's sweat to lower his temperature. No matter how useless the system was, it was the first time it had been separated from her for so long. It was back. The uneasiness in her heart suddenly disappeared, and she felt invincible again. In the middle of the night, Fu Beija began to sweat. His lips were a little pale, and the straps on his head were soaked with sweat. Wei Wei Bai frowned. She wiped him down and changed into his pajamas. She began to remove his bandages again, wanting to change them to prevent the wound from festering. Just as she finished changing the bandages, her hand was held by Fu Beija. He opened his eyes. Although he was tired, his gaze was very clear. His eyes were bright and slightly trembling. "Tell me, other than me and Li Xinghe, how many benefactors do you have that you need to repay?" Wei Wei Bai was stunned. After thinking for a while, she shook her head.
"No."
Fu Beija looked at her in disbelief. "Really? If Li Xinghe kills me again, who will you help next time?" Wei Wei Bai lowered her head. Her hair that was not tied up fell softly. She lowered her eyes and looked at him for a long time before saying softly, "I'll help you." These words touched his heart. Fu Beija did not want to believe it, but his heart was softened by her words. He held her hand and stared blankly for a long time before saying weakly, "Don't lie to me. I'm just muddling along. If you lie to me, you can kill me." Wei Wei Bai smiled. Her lips had a seductive luster under the light. She said, "Okay, if you find out that I'm lying to you, you can kill me." Fu Beija gritted his teeth and said, "Who said I'm going to kill you? The one I'm going to kill is Li Xinghe." Chapter 1082. Wei Wei Bai faintly raised her eyebrows. Her strategy of warmth had actually risen at this time. During the meal, Fu Beija stared at Wei Wei Bai, who was sitting under the light. eating quietly and elegantly. He gave her all the dishes that she liked. Then he said to her, "During this period of time, I will be heading south." Wei Wei Bai almost choked to death on her food. Heading south, my foot. Why did even Fu Beija want to go south? Fu Beija saw that her expression was not good and thought that she was worried about him. Immediately, the unbearable feeling of wanting to separate was relieved. His expression became gentle. "Wei Wei, I have to settle my grudges with the Li family. I am at odds with the South. Furthermore, I have been preparing for 2 years. It's time for me to go south and destroy the Li family." Wei Wei Bai raised her head and frowned. "Must we fight?" Fu Beija's handsome face had a few traces of killing intent, making him look cold and determined. He said softly, "In this world, it's either you die or I live. If we don't unite, then the common people will not be able to live a decent life." Wei Wei Bai's eyes had a few traces of surprise, as if she did not expect him to say such words. Fu Beija's face turned red when he was looked at by her. He immediately ate 2 mouthfuls of rice and said vaguely, "Of course, I am not that selfless. I am greedy for power, and I don't want to be suppressed by anyone, so I must win." The Leaf family was his biggest obstacle. He wanted to move away and kick it away. He wanted her to live in a peaceful world without war in the future, and not be in constant danger because of him. When these words were said to Wei Wei Bai, he felt a little embarrassed. Furthermore, he would not say anything that had not been achieved yet. Suddenly, a piece of red braised pork appeared in his bowl. Wei Wei Bai gave it to him. He raised his head to look at her, only to find that she was eating slowly with her head down, as if the person who picked up the food for him was someone else. Fu Beija couldn't help but reveal a smile. He said, "This time I'm going south. The early deployment and the attack on the southern powers will take about 2 months. Can you wait for me? Tidy up the south and let his forces stand at the top." Of course, it couldn't be 2 months. It could be a few years faster or even 10 years slower. However, 2 months was enough for him to establish a relatively safe area in the south. When the time came, he would come back to pick her up. After finishing her dinner, Wei Wei Bai raised her head to look at him. Her eyes were like water, carrying a gentle reluctance to part with him. She said, "Go, I won't let you worry." These words made Fu Beija tremble. He had always fought alone, and this was the first time he realized the benefits of having a woman behind him. She said that she wouldn't let him worry, not only about herself, but also about his entire rear. Fu Beija didn't know why, but he believed her words so much. At night, after he finished showering, he saw Wei Wei Bai still lying on the sofa, reading a book. Her appearance was soft and gentle, and her freshly washed black hair fell under the sofa, cool and beautiful. Fu Beija couldn't help but stare at her. For the first time, his heart felt stable. When he first found out that he was being forced to marry, his entire body was burning with anger. Since when could other people make decisions about his matters? And it was such an important matter in his life. When he hurried to the north to stop it, he asked someone to inquire about Wei Wei Bai. Although he didn't find out much, he knew that she was raised like a girl in a boudoir. She didn't leave the house and had never received a Western education, let alone go to school. He already had a big discount in his heart. Chapter 1083. This kind of woman was futile and pedantic. It was one thing for her to be stupid. She might not even know how to read. What was more frightening was that her 3 views were definitely not the same as his. This kind of woman, it was not that he was conceited, but he really felt that she was not good enough for him. That was why the day he rushed over happened to be the wedding day, and he was forced to carry the sedan chair to the main entrance. That slap felt like it was on his face. He asked someone to post a notice of freedom of marriage just to give both parties a way out, to let her break off the engagement with dignity. Fu Beija admitted that he was selfish, but not to the extent of being a scumbag. But he did not expect that when she entered the door, the bullet that he shot did not scare her out, but trapped himself. Fu Beija walked to her side, slowly squatted down, and rested his head on her knee. He was like a big child, with his hands around her waist. He did not say anything and just looked at her silently, as if he could look at her like this for a lifetime. Wei Wei Bai was holding a book in her hand and looked at him with some surprise. "What's wrong?" Fu Beija shook his head. "Your body is soft and comfortable. Be my pillow." Every time before he went to the battlefield, he needed to find something to relax. In the past, it was wine or horse racing with those officers. Doing something fun and exciting. But tonight, he was going to fight the biggest battle, but surprisingly, he just wanted to lean on her and look at her. That thrill-loving and adventurous heart in his body settled down. Wei Wei Bai looked at him silently for a while, then she put down the book and kissed his forehead. Fu Beija smiled, and there was a trace of silly satisfaction in his smile. He sighed softly. No wonder they say that the beauty is the most damaging trap for a hero. I understand now. If you stop me and don't let me go, I will really listen to you. Wei Wei Bai knew that Fu Beija was saying sweet nothings. Men are full of tricks when they say sweet nothings. She really wanted him not to go out and face this old woman every day. Putting aside the fact that the favorable impression points had stagnated, they might even regress. A man like Fu Beija was like an eagle. She couldn't restrain him. She had to set him free or go with him. Otherwise, her favorable impression of him wouldn't drop like that. She thought about it a few times, but her face was still as gentle as ever. I believe that you can come back, and I also believe that you can succeed. Whatever you want to do, I will not stop you. I will only support you. What she said was also in line with her old-fashioned and feudal character. Wei Wei Bai's persona had actually collapsed a lot, but she thickened her skin and felt that her persona would also grow. After all, it was fine as long as Fu Beija liked her. Sure enough, when he heard her words, his eyes lit up as if he had found a soulmate. He couldn't help but rub his face against her thigh, just like a silly dog that had retracted its wolf tail. As he rubbed against her, his gaze and actions started to change. His voice was hoarse. "Wei Wei, are you still in pain?" Wei Wei Bai was expressionless. She picked up the book again and read it seriously. "It hurts. It hurts a lot." It was obvious that she wasn't going to fall for it. Fu Beija's face turned red. "Then I'll help you rub it." Wei Wei Bai. The system licked the potato chips silently, not letting the host hear that it was secretly eating potato chips. He said to Bai Wei Wei, "Let's go, BA. Just treat it as whoring a man with 8 abs. Think about it, in the modern world, a duck with such a good figure, such a good appearance, would cost a sky-high price." Wei Wei Bai. Damn, did the system and its target have no moral integrity? / Quick. Chapter 1084. Couldn't he have a bit of shame? His brain was filled with dirty trash, and he actually wanted to drag her down with him? Was she that low of a person? She barely had some integrity. Wei Wei Bai reached out to push away Fu Beija's face and said with a cold expression, "You'll be heading south tomorrow morning, so rest early. Don't waste energy on meaningless things." Fu Beija looked at her with sparkling eyes and said in a very gentle voice, "All right, I'll listen to you." Wei Wei Bai let out a sigh of relief as she escaped this calamity. Just as she was thinking this, she was suddenly picked up by him. Fu Beija pressed her down on the bed and unbuttoned her blouse with his warm fingers. His rough palms caressed her delicate skin, causing her to shiver. Wei Wei Bai's expression changed. "Didn't you say you'd listen to me?" Fu Beija innocently looked at her with a roguish appearance. "That's right, didn't I listen to you and not waste energy on meaningless things?" He said this as his body covered her. His breath blew on her face, bringing a passionate fire. "But being with you is the most meaningful thing. There is nothing more meaningful than this." This was the truth. It had never been this meaningful before. It was meaningful to the point that he felt very happy. Ding! The male lead's favorable impression has increased to 80. In the morning, Fu Beija put on his military uniform and buttoned up the cold buttons. He then picked up his hat and put it on. The man in the mirror was already cold and unyielding. His martial attire made him look even more austere. However, when his gaze landed on the sleeping woman on the bed, his stern demeanor immediately turned into gentleness. He came to the side of the bed and looked at her sleeping on her side, his brows slightly knit together. She was very tired. His fingers gently smoothed her brows, and then he kissed her red and swollen lips. Then he stood up again and placed a document on the table before turning to leave. Last night, he deliberately made her so tired that she couldn't wake up because he couldn't bear to see her reluctant gaze. He didn't want to be separated from her. He could only leave early. When Wei Wei Bai woke up, Fu Beija had already left. The system said. He boarded the plane and headed straight south. This time, the male lead will probably be gone for a long time. We only have 1 month left. We can't wait for him to come back. Moreover, the side quest was not completed. It was stuck in a parting sentence. Wei Wei Bai yawned. Let's find a time to go down south as well. Only by going through thick and thin together can we fill up our last good impression. Fu Beija, that man, had gone through a mountain of blades and a sea of flames to make him give up his life for her. She had to risk her life to accompany him. Therefore, it was a good opportunity for her that he was going to fight. Of course, it was useless to chase after him now. After some time, when he was in danger, it would be more sincere for her to rush over. It was very easy to be in danger on the battlefield. Therefore, Wei Wei Bai was very leisurely. She ate, drank, played, and enjoyed the scenery. She had someone to pick her up and take care of her life. She wished there was no such thing as a strategy. She might as well just live like this without ambition. After about 10 days, even the system could not stand it anymore. Wake up, host, you have to work. The system suddenly felt that it was the life of an old maid. If the host was tired, it would be annoyed. If the host was too idle, it would be annoyed. Wei Wei Bai ate an apple and read a romance novel. Although the novel in this world had a sense of age, the writing style and plot were excellent. It was really good. She said, "No hurry, there's still 10 or 20 days. Let me finish reading these novels first." System. Where is your bottom line? Where is your integrity? Where is your work ethic? It was all eaten up by the novels. Suddenly, an officer guarding the door walked in. He stood at the door and bowed his head respectfully. "Madam, there is a guest." Wei Wei Bai looked up indifferently. "Who is it?" The officer said, "It's Chenru." He directly said Chenru, without any respect for Fu Beija's stepmother. It was also because of Fu Beija's order that they shouted like that. Wei Wei Bai nodded. "Let her in." Chenru walked in wearing a red cheongsam and a coat with a fox collar. She was not old and looked somewhat beautiful. She saw Bai Wei Wei reclining in a chair, wearing a light blue cheongsam with long sleeves, casually draped in a satin jacket. She looked noble and elegant. She even wore an expensive jade bracelet on her wrist. She looked like a lotus flower in clear water, so beautiful that it shone. Chenru's heart was sour, but she sat down quietly and said to Wei Wei Bai, "Wei Wei, there is something that I should tell you." Wei Wei Bai did not pay much attention to her. If she was not the target, she really did not want to bother. She was bored and wanted to see what kind of fun Chenru could bring, so she let her in. Seeing Wei Wei Bai's indifferent attitude, Chenru's nails dug into the flesh of her palm. "I'll let you go crazy, but you'll cry later." Chenru sneered, but her voice was sad. "Beija is dead, do you know?" Chapter 1085. Wei Wei Bai. The system immediately said, "That's not true, you're lying." He was only shot once, right in the chest, grazing his heart. He was betrayed by his own adjutant, so he had no choice but to head north overnight, but was blocked by Li Xinghe in the south. In the end, he was barely alive and was hiding in a warehouse in the slums of Li Xinghe's territory. As long as we can contact the army, we can kill that betraying adjutant and revive him. Wei Wei Bai, wait, what's with this series of words and so much information? It's all commas. When Chenru saw Bai Wei Wei, she finally showed a surprised expression. She couldn't help but smile secretly. Then, she pretended to be worried and said, "Wei Wei Bai, Beija insisted on going against the south. In the end, he was shot in the chest and fell into the water. Although his body hasn't been found yet, we all know that he's dead. Wei Wei Bai looked up at her. Her eyes were cold, like a pool of water or ice. Chenru saw that she was still calm, and her fingers were clenched. Something was wrong with her eyes. She didn't believe that Wei Wei Bai would be so calm after hearing about Fu Beija's death. Wasn't Wei Wei Bai's good life now all because of Fu Beija? She was the one who invited Wei Wei Bai into the family, with the help of the elders in the family. She also tried her best to find out. She knew that Wei Wei Bai was a traditional and obedient girl who didn't have much experience. If such a woman entered the Fu family, she would be able to do whatever she wanted to her. However, after Wei Wei Bai entered the family, she actually fell in love with Fu Beija. Fu Beija actually took Wei Wei Bai away. This made it impossible for her and the elders in the family to do anything to Wei Wei Bai. He had really suffered a double loss. Thinking about how Fu Beija had suppressed her family, the hatred in her heart surged, and her voice turned cold. Wei Wei, although Beija is dead, you are still his widow. Are you pregnant? Chenru looked at her worriedly. Wei Wei Bai was expressionless. What is it? It was as if he really didn't know what she was asking. Chenru lowered her voice and asked, Do you have a child? You can only inherit Beija's assets if you have a child. Otherwise, you will be chased out of the Fu family. Wei Wei Bai reached out and touched her stomach, where she had just eaten. Then, she slowly stretched out her fingers and combed her hair gracefully. Then, under Chenru's anxious gaze, she said softly, I just had my period, so I don't think so. Chenru's face darkened. She gritted her teeth and hurriedly said, You can't say that. You have to tell others that you're pregnant with Fu Beija's child to maintain your current comfortable life. Chenru didn't believe that Wei Wei Bai would be willing to part with her current life. To make Wei Wei Bai's life better, Fu Beija had sent all the tailors, chefs, and jewelry stores in the city to serve her. This small building was not small at all. There were many places outside the building that belonged to Fu Beija. Even the army could drive in. It was the safest place to live. Not to mention, there must be all the documents of Fu Beija's wealth in the study. Even if Chenru was living a life of luxury provided by the Fu family, when she saw Wei Wei Bai being pampered so much, her eyes turned red. She had tried her best to coax the other half of the military order out of Marshal Fu. If she had half of the Fu family's military strength, everyone would have to obey her, and no one would dare to give in to her. Even if Fu Beija came back to life, he would have to be respectful to her. Chapter 1086. Therefore, Wei Wei Bai's child was very important. Without the child, the military order in her hand would be useless. Wei Wei Bai seemed to have heard something strange. She said, I'm not pregnant, how can I lie? Chenru sneered, Of course you can. No one will know if you're pregnant during your pregnancy. When your belly is bigger, you can stuff some cotton wool or something to hide it from people. My sister-in-law is pregnant and can be in time for your delivery. Her motive was obvious. The child belonged to Chenru's family. Fu Beija's family property would all belong to Chenru's family. Then Chenru would be able to use the military force. She would get all the benefits. This woman was too greedy. Wei Wei Bai listened to the system report on Fu Beija's situation. He would not die. But because of that shot, his body was on the verge of collapse. Wei Wei Bai calculated the days. If she went south now, she should be able to be in time for Fu Beija to share the joys and sorrows. The favorability was beckoning to her. Wei Wei Bai put down the book and sat up straight. Then she said softly, Old witch, your words are so beautiful. I wonder how you are so thick-skinned. I'm so thick-skinned, but I'm blushing. Chenru suddenly stood up and her face changed. Is this how you talk to your mother-in-law? Wei Wei Bai said, Since ancient times, mother-in-law and daughter-in-law have been at odds. We are enemies. Don't be too close. Chenru smiled sinisterly. She did not expect Wei Wei Bai to be so stubborn. She did not give her any face at all. She had lost her husband and had no one to rely on. How dare she be so arrogant? Chenru said, It seems that you are going to fall out with me. I don't know who helped you to marry into our family, but now you are repaying kindness with ingratitude. Wei Wei Bai looked up. The murderous look in her eyes was like a knife that pierced people's backs. I heard that you have half of the Fu family's military order? Chenru thought she was scared. Yes, I do. Wei Wei Bai looked at her from head to toe, as if looking for something. Chenru felt uncomfortable under her gaze. Why are you looking at me? Wei Wei Bai nodded. The military order is such an important thing. Normally, you would definitely hide it. But today, you want to ally with me. To show your sincerity or gain my trust, you would definitely carry such an expensive thing with you. Her guess was not far from the truth. The system casually reminded him, it's in the sachet on her waist. Chenru's expression tightened as she glared at Wei Wei Bai with resentment. She said, whether it's on me or not, you don't have a share, let alone use it. Today, I actually wanted to save you. I was really blind. After saying that, Chenru turned around and walked out with her head held high. However, the cold muzzle of a gun was pointed at the back of her head. Then, Wei Wei Bai's indifferent voice sounded, leave the military order and you can go. Chenru's body stiffened. What are you doing? Do you think you can live after killing me? You wouldn't dare. Wei Wei Bai smiled and said softly, I'm so scared. After saying that, she pulled the safety of the gun. The crisp sound was like the Grim Reaper waving his scythe. Chenru's legs trembled. Wei Wei Bai, don't mess around. It's useless even if you have the military order. You don't have the other one. In the case of half of the military order, she couldn't use it if she didn't have a child. But if she could get the other half of the military order would become a whole one. Chapter 1087. It was enough to order Fu Beijia and all the bodyguards of the Fu family to stay in the city. But the other half was left with Fu Beijia, so no one could have it. Wei Wei Bai gently approached Chenru. Her voice was soft and cold, like cold silk sliding past her ears. Coincidentally, I also have half of it. I also have all the wealth and documents that Fu Beijia gave me, and even the command of his bodyguards. After saying that, Wei Wei Bai pulled open the sachet on her waist. Chenru was shocked. Impossible. She was about to turn around. Wei Wei Bai held the sachet and mercilessly hit the back of her head with the butt of the gun. Chenru was knocked to the ground and fainted. Wei Wei Bai put away her expression and took out the military order and the military order that Fu Beijia left on the table before he left, and put them together. Fu Beijia was going to war, so he gave her the best things. No matter how well prepared he was. He also knew that war was not a game, so he gave her the best protection. Even if he did not come back, she would have a peaceful life for the rest of her life. Wei Wei Bai said, Tongzi, although the target this time is a hooligan, he is still a man. If a real man liked a woman, he would be responsible for her for the rest of his life. With a favorability of 80, he could already do so much. No wonder it was so hard to get Fu Beijia's favorability. The system wanted to say that the previous targets were all very manly, but it remembered that they were all the same person. Wei Wei Bai praised one of them, so it did not say anything. Wei Wei Bai took the military order, put on a long coat, hat and gloves, and then walked out gracefully. The adjutant immediately came over. Madam, where are you going? Then he immediately opened the umbrella and held it above Wei Wei Bai's head. Wei Wei Bai looked up. It was actually snowing. Autumn left and winter came. Even the weather changed. Wei Wei Bai said, I know something happened to him. The adjutant's expression did not change. Our duty is to protect you and follow you for the rest of your life. There will be someone in charge of taking care of the young marshal. Therefore, from the very beginning, they did not intend to let Wei Wei Bai know that something had happened to Fu Beijia. Bai Wei Wei revealed a smile that unexpectedly carried a trace of coldness. It was even colder than the snow. She said, Well then, follow me. Go get the car ready. The adjutant immediately said, Where does Madam want to go? Wei Wei Bai touched the military order in her hand. Go and bring my man back. The adjutant was slightly stunned. When he finally understood what she meant, He suddenly bowed respectfully to Wei Wei Bai and then asked someone to prepare the car. Wei Wei Bai boarded the train to the south on the same day. In the south, Fu Beijia looked at the snow outside the window. He fished in his bosom and pulled out a handkerchief. Although the handkerchief had been washed clean, the stain could still be seen. It was the handkerchief that he had thrown away, but then brought back. It was Wei Wei Bai's. He kissed the handkerchief and then leaned tiredly against the wooden box in the warehouse, enduring the severe pain in his chest. He did not expect that one of his trusted adjutants was a southern spy who had been lurking around him for more than 10 years. He had hidden himself well. Fu Beijia had also been hit by the spy. He endured the severe pain and coughed. Hiding in this warehouse was not a long-term solution. His wound could not be dragged on. If it became infected, he might die. The biggest problem now was that he could not contact his army. His army had not suffered any losses yet, but because of his disappearance, it was only a matter of time before Li Xinghe took over. Wei Wei, you have caused me a lot of trouble. Chapter 1088. If Li Xinghe was dead, there wouldn't be so many problems. Although he was complaining, Fu Beijia's eyes were still gentle and full of nostalgia. The snow in the north was definitely heavier than in the south. The weather was so cold, he had asked someone to hire a tailor in advance, so he must have prepared winter clothes. He didn't know if she wore any. With such a weak body, if she didn't take good care of herself, she would definitely fall sick. Fu Beijia thought that if he couldn't get through this time, if he died, then who would be able to protect Wei Wei Bai like this in the future? After all, it was a chaotic time, although he gave her so much protection. But he still couldn't predict the future. What he wanted was for her to live a rich and peaceful life. Even if she didn't have him, it didn't matter. Fu Beijia suddenly turned his head to look out of the window. Sometimes it was instinctive to be vigilant of danger, so he rolled away like lightning. Bullets were fired from outside the window, and the place where he was sitting just now was hit by a cloud of dust. Fu Beijia pulled out his wound and took a deep breath. He leaned against the wall. Because he lost his gun when he fell into the water, he had a small knife on his finger. The knife emitted a sharp, cold light, just like his eyes. The door of the warehouse was quickly smashed open. Fu Beijia looked at the door coldly. Soon, a row of soldiers rushed in and immediately pointed their guns at him. They formed a tight encirclement. A man wearing an elegant gown slowly walked in. His handsome face revealed a trace of ridicule. We meet again, Fu Beijia. Fu Beijia leaned against the wall. The wound on his chest started to bleed. He smiled carelessly. Li Xinghe, I thought you were scared out of your wits because you ran away in my territory with your tail between your legs. Li Xinghe was not angry, but calm and composed. Unfortunately, this time you are in my territory, and you are being chased like a mouse. Fu Beijia sneered. That's true. Every dog has its day.
Who knows what will happen next time?
Li Xinghe slowly took out a gun. But I won't be able to turn to you. I'm here to send you on your way. When your soul returns to hell, don't complain about your bad luck when you see the king of hell. Fu Beijia looked around. He really blocked all of them. Li Xinghe had made ample preparations this time. It could be seen that he really wanted to take his life at all costs. Li Xinghe pulled the safety off the gun and pointed it directly at Fu Beijia's forehead. He said coldly, "Don't look. If it were you, would you give me a chance to escape?"
No.
Fu Beijia's fingers were extremely tense. The knife in his hand was secretly pointed at Li Xinghe's chest. He was injured, so his aim was definitely not as good as usual, so he was waiting for Li Xinghe to shoot. Once the gun was fired, he would immediately throw the knife in his hand. He reckoned that he would drag Li Xinghe down with him. Anyway, if he died, Li Xinghe wouldn't be able to live either. Wei Wei Bai had saved Li Xinghe. If he died, wouldn't it be logical for her to be with Li Xinghe? Fu Beijia wasn't that generous. He would haggle over every little detail. He didn't want Wei Wei Bai to have other men. If there was a ghost, he would definitely haunt Wei Wei Bai after he died. Although he wanted Wei Wei Bai to live a good life, as long as there was another man, he couldn't help but feel jealous. Li Xinghe held the gun for a long time. He hesitated for a long time before finally putting it down. He gritted his teeth and said, "Fu Beija, go." Fu Beija looked at him like he was looking at a fool. Li Xinghe's eyes turned red in anger. He said fiercely, "Wei Wei saved me twice. The only thing she wants in return is your life." Fu Beija was stunned for a moment. Li Xinghe closed his eyes and opened them again, looking at him with hatred. "She doesn't want anything, but she wants me to let you go once if I catch you." Fu Beija didn't expect Wei Wei Bai to make such a request. She clearly smashed his head to save Li Xinghe. But in the end, she wanted in return to save his life. Fu Beija couldn't help but smile. He liked this reward. He liked it too much.
He was really happy that she cared about him.
Li Xinghe saw him smile and said angrily, "If you don't scram, I'll give you 1 hour. After 1 hour, I will catch up with you again. At that time, I will kill you with 1 shot." Fu Beija forced himself to stand up straight and said proudly, "I don't need to scram. My woman wants me to live. Of course I have to walk out with my head held high." After saying that, he looked at Li Xinghe provocatively. Li Xinghe gritted his teeth. Why was this man so hateful? Fu Beija staggered out. When he passed by Li Xinghe, he suddenly said, "Do you know what Wei Wei likes?" Li Xinghe was stunned. He held his breath and looked forward to his answer. Fu Beija looked at him and said, "She likes me." After saying that, a knife was pressed against Li Xinghe's neck. This action was as fast as lightning. It was simply not something a human could do. He was clearly injured. He couldn't even walk properly. He was clearly protected by so many people. Li Xinghe was actually being held hostage by Fu Beija. Fu Beija raised his eyebrows and sneered. "I said, every dog has its day. Now it's on my side, Li Xinghe." Thinking about his woman. Even if he died, he wanted to drag him to hell with him. This was how jealous men were. // Chapter 1089. Fu Beija stuck close to Li Xinghe and was even taller than Li Xinghe by half a head. His eyes were sinister, and there was a hint of a cold smile. The thin blade in his hand was pressed tightly against Li Xinghe's neck. "I told you to get lost obediently. After all, if you die, your family will really collapse." Li Xinghe's face paled, but he was not threatened. "If you die, your power in the north will also be gone. I don't think the Fu family can produce another Fu Beija." Fu Beija. "Thank you for thinking so highly of me. So are you planning to drag me down with you?" Li Xinghe's fingers clenched and loosened, and he was extremely nervous. Fu Beija's blade had already cut his skin, and blood began to flow down. The people Li Xinghe brought looked at each other, and they did not know what to do. After all, Li Xinghe was the only child of the Li family, and if he died, the Li family would really be finished. Li Xinghe's voice was a little hoarse. "Even if I let you go, you will not abide by the spirit of the contract and let me go." Fu Beija's voice deepened. "Everyone knows that I abide by the spirit of the contract, and I will definitely abide by my words. If you let me go and send me to my territory, I will definitely let you go." Li Xinghe sneered. "Who are you trying to fool? Normally, you will abide by the promise, but if you kill me, the south will be in your pocket. You will definitely be tempted, and breaking a promise will not make you feel guilty at all. Sure enough, the person who understands you the most is your enemy." Li Xinghe was right. Fu Beija was such a hooligan. If the benefits were big enough, he would not necessarily abide by the promise. Fu Beija's chest hurt, and he knew that he could not hold on. But he didn't let anyone see his dejected state. They were holding Li Xinghe hostage, and they needed Li Xinghe to open his mouth before they would leave. If Li Xinghe insisted on going against him to the end, then they would really have to perish together. Fu Beija thought for a while, then coldly snorted and said, "It seems like you don't trust me. In fact, Wei Wei also asked me to spare your dog life if I catch you." Li Xinghe was silent for a moment. "Don't lie to me." Fu Beija was too cunning and shameless. He was afraid that he would be tricked. Fu Beija said coldly. I won't joke about her words. I can go against my principles, but I won't use her. He would never use her as a tool for his own survival. Li Xinghe said, if she was telling the truth, you wouldn't have killed me. The reason was just like him. He owed Wei Wei by 2 lives. But the more important reason was that he was full of feelings for her. He could only do this for her, so of course he couldn't wait to do it. Even if he knew that Fu Beija was a poisonous snake,
he would still let him go this time.
So out of empathy, Fu Beija wouldn't go against Wei Wei Bai's request and let him go. Fu Beija's voice was gloomy. You're right, but I've already let you go once. You didn't shoot just now, and the knife in my hand didn't pierce your chest. In the end, it was still a deadlock. Anyway, neither of the 2 men believed the other. With Wei Wei Bai involved, the atmosphere became even more tense and scary. A love rival was always more hateful than an ordinary enemy. The 2 sides were in a deadlock. Li Xinghe almost didn't care about his life. He held his breath and let the blood on his neck flow down. If it was someone else, he might have already compromised. But it was Fu Beija. He didn't want to compromise. He didn't want to be inferior to this man. Chapter 1090. Even if he died, he wanted to let Wei Wei Bai see that he, Li Xinghe, was not weaker than Fu Beija. Fu Beija's eyes darkened, although his fingers did not waver due to his strong willpower. But he knew that he had reached his last moment. White snowflakes flew in from outside. A cold atmosphere surrounded the warehouse. Fu Beija gasped for breath and finally said, well, I didn't expect that the person who would accompany me to the Yellow Springs Road would be you. He believed that Li Xinghe would give him an hour. But with his physical condition, it was impossible for him to escape within an hour. Li Xinghe gave him an hour. He wanted to play with him like a mouse, then trample him into the mud and laugh at him, then kill him with 1 shot. If he wanted him to die, he wanted him to die without a shred of face. Fu Beija would rather die together with her than accept an hour's worth of time to escape. Especially when his love rival gave him charity. Li Xinghe's body trembled. He felt a pain in his neck. He felt that the knife was about to cut his throat. At the last moment, a sudden gunshot woke everyone up. Fu Beija suddenly opened his eyes wide and looked outside the warehouse. In the snow, a familiar figure stood outside the warehouse. She was wearing the peach cheongsam that he chose and a beautiful winter coat. She was holding a gun and pointing it at the sky. She was like a flower in full bloom in the snow, emitting a strong light. The impact of this moment made Fu Beija stunned for a few seconds. If it was a normal situation, he might have been found by Li Xinghe and counterattacked. Li Xinghe, on the other hand, was equally shocked and did not react. That figure slowly walked over, followed by the adjutant in military uniform, who held an umbrella to block the snow for her. The atmosphere was so tense and awkward. But she gracefully and powerfully walked over. Fu Beija did not know why, but his eyes were a bit wet. The longing in his heart finally rushed out, turning into a lingering name on his lips. Wei Wei Bai. Ding. The male lead's favorability has increased to 85. Wei Wei Bai walked to the entrance of the warehouse, followed by the soldiers to protect her. She looked at Fu Beija and frowned. Let go of him, Fu Beija. Fu Beija hesitated, then released the knife in his hand and directly pushed Li Xinghe away. Li Xinghe clenched his teeth and was about to say something. Bai Weiwei said, "This place has been surrounded by my people. No one can escape. You have been standing here for a long time. No one can let go of the other. I will be the middleman. Li Xinghe, you take the people away. I will take my husband back." Li Xinghe had a bitter taste in his mouth. Weiwei Bai. Husband. What a close bond that could not be cut off. Weiwei Bai coldly looked at him and said, "Do you want to fight with him? If you really want to fight, then this world will become chaotic." She slowly walked over to Fu Beija. "I don't want to live in a chaotic world. A war will affect my quality of life." Li Xinghe saw her walking over, and just as he was about to take her hand, Weiwei Bai suddenly raised her hand and pointed the cold muzzle at Li Xinghe. "Are you leaving or not?" Your people are already under my control, so if I don't care, you will die. Her people were also Fu Beija's people. If Fu Beija gave the order now, Li Xinghe would become a sieve. Li Xinghe's eyes flashed with a hint of joy. You are still worried about me. Wei Wei Bai said impatiently, get lost. Chapter 1091. Li Xinghe looked at her with a complicated expression. There was sadness, regret, and joy. Then he took a few steps back and ordered, let's retreat. Li Xinghe led the people and walked out. The surrounding soldiers also made a path for Li Xinghe. Suddenly, Wei Wei Bai's voice came from behind. Take care, Li Xinghe. Li Xinghe stopped in his tracks. There were thousands of sighs in his heart, but the weight of her words was enough. Her heart, even if it had nothing to do with love, was enough. He also felt that it was worth it. Li Xinghe said, you take care too. If you are not happy, come and find me. After saying that, he immediately left, afraid to see the scene of Wei Wei Bai caring about Fu Beija. And after Wei Wei Bai said the words, take care, the side mission was finally announced in an incomparably noble manner. She completed the mission. Every time she completed the side mission, it was like a roller coaster. Wei Wei Bai finally breathed a sigh of relief. However, a hand suddenly grabbed her waist and pulled her into a broad embrace. Wei Wei Bai could not react in time. Her whole body was already in Fu Beija's embrace. He frowned, his eyes were cold, and his whole body reeked of blood. He was like an enraged lone wolf, full of rage and aggression.
Take care.
How much kindness do you have to Li Xinghe? Repay it all. Otherwise, don't blame me when I shoot him next time. His words were urgent and heavy. He was almost bleeding. Anger and resentment intertwined, and actually showed flustered and exasperated anxiety. He stood aside injured and looked at Wei Wei Bai. His eyes were always on Li Xinghe. She even asked him to leave. She even told him to take care of himself affectionately. What about him? Did he become cannon fodder in the background? Fu Beija's eyes were filled with cold anger. He was really angry. Wei Wei Bai turned to look at him and saw that his jaw was tense and even trembling. It was obvious how angry Fu Beija was. She suddenly reached out, grabbed his arm, and moved his hand away. He had no strength left, so Wei Wei Bai easily escaped from his arms. Fu Beija lost her and felt empty. His face turned cold. Are you going to leave with Li Xinghe? He still could not let go of Li Xinghe. Bai Wei Wei's attitude towards Li Xinghe was too special. It made him feel like he would be abandoned by Bai Wei Wei at any time, and then she ran away with Li Xinghe. Bai Wei Wei walked up to him in a few steps and suddenly reached out to hug him. Her body was petite and warm. She said softly, don't be stubborn. I'm here. You'll be fine. His chest was full of blood, and his face was as pale as a corpse. He was on the verge of collapsing and was just one breath away from dying. This man actually had the time to be jealous. Fu Beija's vision turned black. He leaned his head on her shoulder. Before he fainted, he did not forget to nag Wei Wei Bai. For example, he told her how to quickly evacuate from here. Which officer could be trusted, who was the spy, how to deal with it. He spoke very quickly. It was impossible to tell that he was half unconscious. His willpower was simply inhuman. His last words before he fainted were, the next time you dare to be so nice to Li Xinghe, I won't be polite. How could he not be polite? He could not hit or kill her. He could not bear to do anything. He could only threaten her verbally. What a coward. Fu Beija despised himself and then fainted. Wei Wei Bai could not support Fu Beija. The adjutant behind her immediately came forward to carry him. Let's go. Wei Wei Bai said to everyone. The time was too tight for this rescue mission. Wei Wei Bai did not care to maintain the image of a gentle woman. She had to be as cold as possible. Otherwise, how could she lead the group of soldiers of the Fu family? Because she had fully unleashed her aura, it made these people respect her even more. Obedience and respect were different after all. The latter could convince people. Fu Beija returned to his own army and fell into danger as he wished. The doctors came and went, guarding him day and night, afraid that their young commander would not be able to hold on and die. Wei Bai also had a serious expression on her face. The time was getting closer and closer to 6 months. She did not expect that Fu Beija would be unconscious because of his injury. She did not even have the chance to increase his favorability. 85 favorability. It would be difficult to increase the remaining 15 favorability in a short period of time. Wei Bai was discussing with the system whether she should spend some of her life points to buy some medicine for Fu Beija. Suddenly, a muffled groan came from behind her. Wei Bai immediately turned around and saw Fu Beija looking at her gently with his eyes open. She immediately reached out and touched his face. It's not hot anymore. The critical period is over. When she lowered her head, she was as gentle and beautiful as a cloud. It softened his heart. In the past, when Fu Beija woke up injured, he was either a doctor or a cold military officer. But today, when he woke up and saw Wei Bai guarding him, he was very happy. Wei, you saved me. I want to repay you. Wei Bai, give me 100 favorability. Fu Beija smiled. I want to give myself to you. Wei Bai, what the hell did he mean by giving himself to her? It was more like giving his heart to her. Then she realized that Fu Beija was kissing her hand and licking it wet. It was very ambiguous. She suddenly understood what he meant by giving himself to her. She slapped him.
Hooligan, you might as well die.
He was already so useless. His brain was still yellow. Chapter 1092. After Fu Beija was out of danger, his body healed at the speed of a beast. His chest was bandaged, and he was wearing a military jacket as he leaned back in his chair. Even if he was seriously injured, it didn't affect his cold aura. The ground was soaked with blood, and the chill was penetrating. The adjutant who betrayed him had been hung up, and there wasn't a single piece of flesh on his body that wasn't injured. Fu Beija looked him up and down, playing with the gun in his hand. His eyes were gloomy, but his expression was very relaxed. I didn't expect you to be the one who betrayed me. This sentence was very cliché, but Fu Beija didn't feel any pain or sorrow. The betrayed adjutant trembled all over. Although the betrayer Fu Beija had already predicted his end, he still felt a chill when he thought of this man's means of dealing with the enemy. Fu Beija said calmly, "Do you have any last words?" The man suddenly cried, "Young Marshal, I had no choice. My family is in the south. I have to protect them." Fu Beija pondered for a moment, then smiled. "That's true. You're a responsible man. Compared to your family, your women and children really don't have enough weight. I might have hated you before, but now I understand you very well." He met Wei Bai. He thought about being together with Wei Bai in the future, and even having a child. If someone used them to threaten him, Fu Beija was probably willing to do anything, not to mention being a spy. Even more terrifying and immoral things were not a problem for him. He had never experienced the warmth of a family, and he didn't think that it was very important. But Bai Wei alone gave him a world that was warmer and more beautiful than fighting under the heavens. Her existence was enough to burn his heart. It was more important than anything else. The betrayed adjutant didn't expect Fu Beija to say this. He thought that this man had no heart and was terrifyingly cold. He quickly said, "Young Marshal, I really had no choice.
Please give me another chance.
I won't betray you again." Fu Beija said casually, "Oh, isn't your family still with Li Xinghe? If I let you go, you'll still deal with me for them." A fierce struggle appeared on the man's face. He suddenly gritted his teeth. "I'll fight with you. I won't betray you again. Even if the other party kills my family, I won't harm you." Fu Beija looked up. His eyes were terrifyingly cold. The faint smile on his face also disappeared. "Say that again." The man said, "I won't betray you." Fu Beija, the last sentence. The man thought that he could live, and a trace of excitement appeared on his face. He quickly expressed his loyalty. "Even if they kill my family, boom." The bullet went through his throat. The throat was not the heart, so it would not die immediately. He would only slowly suffocate and die with blood flowing all over his neck. The man's face was blank for a moment, and then there was a twisted struggle caused by intense pain. Fu Beija slowly sat up from the chair. He wiped the gun in his hand before putting it back into the holster. After killing someone, he did not show the slightest emotion. Fu Beija's eyes were full of mockery. If you had fought to the end, I would have respected you as a man. In the end, you changed sides and ignored your woman and child for your own life. Trash. After saying that, Fu Beija walked out. I'll leave the body to you guys. After solving the problem of the spy, his footsteps quickened. Seeing a familiar room, he pushed the door open and entered. He saw Wei Wei Bai sitting by the window. The fire in the stove warmed the entire room. Chapter 1093. She leaned against the chair and lazily looked at the book. Her laziness had a kind of elegance to it. Fu Beija's footsteps paused. His breathing was a bit chaotic, and his wound even hurt. Wei Wei Bai sensed him and looked up at him. But she saw Fu Beija rushing over and hugging her tightly. Wei Wei Bai shivered. His body was cold, and her skin couldn't stand it. What's wrong? Fu Beija didn't say anything, and just quietly hugged her. That spy's words before he died had completely stirred up the turbulent emotions in his heart. He softly said, I won't betray you or abandon you. I can do anything for you. Ding. The male lead's favorability has increased to 90. The feelings that were completely awakened suddenly heated up and caught him off guard. Wei Wei Bai blinked. She reached out her hand and slowly stroked his back, comforting and warming him. Fu Beija felt her touch, and the hostility that filled his body suddenly disappeared. The fierce battle in his heart was replaced by the tenderness of a woman. Wei Wei Bai's soft voice sounded in his ears. Fu Beija. Fu Beija nodded. He wondered if Wei Wei Bai was moved by him. Did she want to respond to him? You're too heavy. I can't breathe under your weight. Fu Beija. Inhumane. In such a warm moment, she actually cared about this. He hugged her even more tightly and didn't let go. He raised his head and kissed her lips, entangling their breaths. He bitterly said, I'll make you even more breathless. This romantic woman, sooner or later, he would let her know how good he was. He was with her. She had earned a lot. The battle plan was still being carried out urgently. The first few towns in the south began to collapse. Although Fu Beija was injured, he was still full of energy. Wei Wei Bai didn't let him touch her. He said that the doctor told him to rest well and not have sex, or else his body would fall ill. So she forbade him from getting on her bed. Although Fu Beija caught the doctor and beat him up, he still couldn't change Wei Wei Bai's mind. He had no choice but to spend his excess energy on the war. He formulated a series of strategic plans. He used all kinds of underhanded tricks to kill Li Xinghe. Fu Beija even thought that the world was not his #1 goal. His first goal was to remove the thorn in Li Xinghe's side. Otherwise, he always felt that he would be cuckolded one day. Even though Wei Wei Bai said that she didn't have that kind of feeling for Li Xinghe. But the feeling was born from time to time. In the beginning, Wei Wei Bai didn't have that kind of feeling for him. Wasn't it because he shamelessly got her? Perhaps in the future, Li Xinghe would also find an opportunity to pester Wei Wei Bai. Then, she would throw a green hat on his head. And there was one thing that he couldn't compare to Li Xinghe. That bastard Li Xinghe had studied abroad, and his family had been civil officials for generations. He could speak eloquently and was especially good at literature. This kind of cultured bastard was very popular with women. The more Fu Beija thought about it, the gloomier his face became. After the strategy meeting, he went back to his room and saw Wei Wei Bai sitting by the window, reading a book. Fu Beija's face changed. Wasn't this hobby similar to Li Xinghe's? They both liked books. Wei Wei Bai was reading the romance novel happily when a shadow suddenly shrouded her. She looked up blankly and saw Fu Beija looking at her coldly. Wei Wei Bai? ? What kind of heartless thing did she do to be discovered?
Slash.
Chapter 1094. Fu Beija suddenly took the book away from her hand. Without looking at it, he started to pack up the box of books that she brought. All of them were stuffed into a box. Then he asked the adjutant to carry it to the bottom of the lake. This was Wei Bai's spiritual food. She was under so much pressure, and she relied on this little hobby to relieve the pressure. She even wanted to take away the target of her conquest. Wei Bai immediately reached out and grabbed the box. Her expression turned ugly. "Why are you venting your anger on my book? If I have offended you in any way, just say it." Fu Beija felt a surge of anger for no reason. "I am uncultured." Actually, he was cultured, but he was indeed different from Li Xinghe. After all, when he was learning poetry and calligraphy when he was young, he avoided it as much as he could. Even if he learned it, he did not think much of it. When he grew up, even if he went overseas, he was only interested in other people's ships and cannons. He didn't pay any attention to the damned philosophy of art. Thinking about it, Wei Bai and Li Xinghe were actually from a similar family. But Wei Bai and Li Xinghe were more similar. They were not similar to him. They were both gentle and elegant. They even looked like husband and wife. They were even childhood sweethearts. The more he thought about it, the more Fu Beija felt that these two people might really get together in the future. In the future, he would definitely be cuckolded. Wei Bai looked at him in confusion. "Uncultured? Could it be that you are illiterate?" The first time she saw him, his expression was like a hurricane. In 3 seconds, he changed more than 10 times. Fu Beija said, "More or less. So, to be compatible from today onwards, you will be illiterate like me." Wei Bai, what kind of weird reason is this? Fu Beija felt that since he did not want her to read, he should not let her be idle. Who knew if she would think of Li Xinghe? He couldn't bear the thought of it for even a second. Fu Beija immediately pulled her. "Let's go shopping." Wei Bai glanced at his wound. He had just woken up a few days ago, but his legs were already wobbly when he walked. Yet he still wanted to go shopping? Who would have thought that Fu Beija actually had such a hobby? Wei Bai carefully maintained her favorability towards him as they were pressed for time. Then, she became more obedient towards Fu Beija. So she nodded. "Sure. Where do you want to go shopping?" Fu Beija immediately changed his clothes, and a trace of excitement appeared on his face. "There are a lot of imported goods on the streets here, all of which are not available in the north. I'll take you to buy them."
Suddenly he paused.
Because he was in too much of a hurry to put on his clothes, his wound was pulled, and it was very painful. Before Wei Bai could say anything, Fu Beija's face sank again. "I'm already injured, and you're not worried about me going out to buy things? Are you still thinking about someone else?" Wei Bai, the system sighed faintly. This unreasonable man. Wei Bai's mouth twitched. "Then let's not go out. After all, your wound hasn't healed." Fu Beija could be considered a weirdo. If a normal person suffered such an injury, they would probably still be lying in bed on the verge of death. Yet, Fu Beija was full of energy. Fu Beija's expression became even worse. "Do you think that I'll embarrass you if I go out with you? Or do you think that I'm too boring and you don't want me to follow you?" Wei Bai, the system said, "This jealous little princess is so pretentious. Host, it's time for you to show your boyfriend power." Wei Bai really wanted to kick little Princess Fu Beija out. But she had no choice. Her favorability was not full yet. Chapter 1095. She could only swallow her anger and coax him. "Of course I won't despise you, Fu Beija snorted and said sourly. "If Li Xinghe asked you out, you'd probably go. You guys can go to tea parties, drama, poetry, philosophy." Wei Bai finally couldn't hold it in. "Can I break this bastard's head?" The system said, "Although I support you, unfortunately you can't." Wei Bai said, "Such a pretentious man makes me want to kill someone." The system was touched. "You finally know how I feel every time I see you acting like a pretentious little white flower." Wei Bai, she was doing it for her livelihood, for her favorability, for this stupid system's house. Otherwise, why would she act like that? Was she such a pretentious person? Thinking about it carefully, she seemed to be a little bit like that. After all, she was very happy to act like a pretentious little white flower, who asked a little white flower to gain favorability so quickly. Look at this world. She wasn't a little white flower, but the male lead was a substitute prince who was sick. And the favorability was as slow as a snail. Wei Wei Bai thought deeply. Could it be that her path as a little white flower was the correct one? So many targets liked a little white flower. Men were indeed cheap. They liked that pretentious little princess. Fu Beija reached out and pinched Wei Wei Bai's chin. You actually distracted me. Who are you thinking about? Li Xinghe? Wei Wei Bai waved her hand and slapped his hand away. I'm thinking about you. Who else would I be thinking about? What she said was against the rules. Fu Beija's heart was pounding. Without much experience in love, a hooligan's first love would also be at a loss like an idiot. He forced himself to maintain that helplessness, his face still gloomy. Fu Beija pursed his lips. Then let's go shopping. He finally came back. Wei Wei Bai looked at him warily. She would not agree to go out. He would have to repeat the words, "You don't care about my wound," again.
All right.
She agreed, like walking on thin ice. Fu Beija smiled and extended his arm. Hold my hand. Wei Wei Bai silently held his hand. One look and you can tell that we are husband and wife. This position is very good. Fu Beija said with a smile. Wei Wei Bai, I have nothing to say. The system secretly stuffed snacks into its mouth and couldn't help but mutter. It's more like a father taking care of his kindergarten daughter. It didn't say that there was a difference in their height. Fu Beija was too tall, while Wei Wei Bai was petite like the girls from Jiangnan. Just think of the tall and strong bear-like men in the north and the delicate little girl in the south. Wei Wei Bai suddenly felt that she should buy the system's house. Otherwise, if it couldn't get married in the future, wouldn't it cling to her for the rest of its life? She thought of her white hair and teeth falling out. This lowly system was still making sarcastic remarks. She felt that her future was dark. Fu Beija brought Wei Wei Bai to the most famous tailor shop in the city to order clothes. She didn't bring enough clothes with her this time. She brought a lot of books. The winter in the south was cold and wet. One could fall sick if they weren't careful. Fu Beija didn't want Wei Wei Bai to drag down her body because of the cold. The tailor carefully measured Wei Wei Bai's size. Fu Beija sat on the chair with a cigarette in his hand and looked at her with gentle eyes. It was as if she was the most precious treasure in his arms. No matter how he looked at her, he felt that she was beautiful and that he couldn't wait to hold her. If a man liked a woman, there was no need for words. It could be seen in his eyes. He couldn't hide his deep feelings. Wei Wei Bai said something to the tailor and casually looked up. She saw Fu Beija leaning on the chair. The sunlight outside the window shone on him. For a moment, she was in a daze. She felt that this scene was unusually familiar. She thought for a moment and inexplicably remembered that Yi Yuxuan had also brought her to a tailor before. It was an engagement dress. At that time, Yi Yuxuan's eyes were also like this man's. It was so gentle and made people feel an inexplicable sense of calmness.
Slash.
Chapter 1096. After making the clothes, Fu Beija brought Wei Wei Bai to buy some imported goods. They were all women's toys. Wei Wei Bai picked out a pair of gloves and a tie for Fu Beija. Fu Beija was overjoyed. During dinner, Fu Beija brought Wei Wei Bai to eat Western food. He helped Wei Wei Bai cut the steak and taught her how to taste wine. Wei Wei Bai said that it was hard for her to pretend that she didn't know how to. When they went back, the sky was already dark. Fu Beija was wearing a black coat. Under his beautiful short hair, his eyes were always looking at Wei Wei Bai. When he saw that it was snowing, he personally held an umbrella to shield Wei Wei Bai from the snow. The two of them walked slowly on the long road. The snowflakes fell on the umbrella. At this moment, Fu Beija couldn't help but hold her slender shoulders. He said softly, I've never been so calm before. In his life, other than his short childhood, he had never had a day of peace and stability. Every time he saw other people being in love or foolishly leading their families to play some childish games, the first thing he felt was not the warmth of a family. It was whether this group of people was sick. But when he met Wei Bai, he realized that he was sick too. And seriously sick. Wei Bai looked up at him and said indifferently, "Ever since I met you, I haven't had a day of peace." Fu Beijia didn't expect her to say this. He was speechless for a moment. Although the Bai family was lonely, they still had a family background. Wei Bai led a good life. And later on, the Fu family took care of her until the day she married him. Her peaceful days were broken. Fu Beijia felt a rare trace of guilt in his heart. In the future, when you're with me, I'll let you live a happy and peaceful life every day. Wei Bai glanced at him. Come on, you're fighting. If I die in the gunfire one day, it won't be peaceful. Fu Beijia was a little dissatisfied. He reached out and pinched her pink cheeks. You have so little confidence in me? Am I the kind of man who will put you in danger? He had prepared a lot of escape routes for her, even if he died unexpectedly in the future. The escape route he left behind would allow Bai Weiwei to live peacefully. In the end, there was still a way out. He had even arranged for her to leave the country in advance. Even if the war in the country, she didn't need to stay here. It wasn't that he didn't have confidence, but it was his instinct to not let her suffer the slightest accident. When Fu Beijia was arranging a backup plan for her, he wanted to use all of his resources, for fear that she would be wronged. There had never been a woman who could make him put in so much effort. She was still not satisfied. He was so capable and good. Shouldn't she be grateful? Seeing that Fu Beijia's face was getting more and more bitter, Wei Bai was afraid that his Prince syndrome would act up again. She immediately took out a pair of mail gloves from her bag. She held his hand. The early winter snow was mixed with light rain. It was extremely wet and cold. His fingers were also stained with coldness. She lowered her head and put on the gloves for him. I bought it for you just now. It's cold, try it on. Fu Beijia knew that she bought it for him. But when she lowered her head, a few strands of hair in the bun stuck to her fair neck. Her eyes were gentle as she bent down to put on the gloves for him. The warmth of this moment. He was so touched that his eyes welled up. Wei Bai put on the gloves for him. She looked up and was about to say something. Chapter 1097. He had already bent down and kissed her lips softly. His breath hit her face. His moist lips and tongue were a bit domineering, but more importantly, he was cherishing her. He held the umbrella with one hand and held her fingers with the other. Just like that, under the snow, under the umbrella, he kissed her almost sincerely. He loved her. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 93. Warmth was slow to gain traction, but once he was moved, then the favorability would naturally rise without any need for any large-scale melodramatic stimulation. Wei Bai knew this, and even knew that although Fu Beijia was an adventurer, he still longed for a gentle and peaceful life. She had now become the most peaceful and beautiful thing in his world. When she was being led back by Fu Beijia, she sighed. She suddenly sighed. Tongzi, if only you could give me another 10 years. She had thought countless times that if she had enough time, there would be no restrictions. She was able to turn any kind of sadistic writing into a long-lasting and sweet farming writing. She would not need to keep looking for explosive stimuli to desperately increase the favorability of the target. The system was silent for a while before saying, I'll apply for a plane that takes a long time to conquer. Wei Bai said, Isn't it random? I can still apply? She had always thought that the planes were randomly distributed. The system said, It's random, but you have one chance to apply for a plane. Because we're too poor and our status is too low, we only have the right to apply, but we may not succeed. Wei Bai, how poor and lowly were she and the system? Applying for a plane did not seem reliable. It was like winning the lottery. She thought about it and decided to apply. If she did not apply, she would not have the chance anyway. And she was actually quite lucky. When she was 15, she bought a lottery ticket. She won $5. She still had the luck to win the lottery. Wei Wei Bai said, "Okay, apply. It's best if you can apply for a plane that can be conquered for 10 to 20 years. The system said, "I'll go fill in the application." Wei Wei Bai was very heroic.
Go.
He always felt that the host would kill him if his application was not approved. The system glanced at the remaining HP in its hand. It was too poor. Bribing through the back door was not even enough to buy a system flower basket. Who was the host that didn't manage to get in through the back door last time? I forgot. It seemed to be something that happened 10,000 years ago. After returning home, it was rare that Fu Beija was not beastly. He hugged her and chatted with her like this. As they chatted, he slowly fell asleep. The wound was still dragging down his body, making him not as lively as before. His sleeping appearance was especially quiet and handsome. The warm light shone on his face, without a trace of his usual ruthlessness and irritation. He was more like a carefree, pampered young man. Wei Wei Bai stared at him for a while before she finally dared to sneakily reach under her pillow and take out a romance novel. She had read half of the novel before she went to bed and stuffed it under her pillow. This book was melodramatic, cliché, exciting, and interesting. As for other novels, it was probably because of the era, even if they were novels about love and love. But they still wanted some face and tried to make the story as literary as possible. But this book, it was not like that. What cheating, being a cuckold, getting pregnant with another man's child after being a cuckold. She ran away with the ball, but halfway through, she was miscarried by her love rival. After the miscarriage, she was caught. Her husband thought that she had miscarried the child, so he imprisoned her and abused her to vent his anger. After a while, they got together again, and she got pregnant again. Then came the mistress. Chapter 1098. There were only 2 days left. Wei Wei Bai crossed his arms and paced back and forth. The last 5 points of affinity, if there was no excitement, it would take a year to get it. So, all the talk of a steady stream flowing slowly was nonsense. It had to be explosive, exciting, and melodramatic. Without a pot of Mao Shui Wang, the affinity would not increase. Bai Weiwei thought about it. Should I create an accident, such as taking a grenade to blow myself up, or find a way to drug Fu Beija and send him to someone else's bed, and then create a big tragedy where you tear me apart and I roar at him in anger? Otherwise, the affinity won't increase at all. The system said, "You've been reading too many novels recently. You need to slow down. Reality is different from novels." The host is obsessed with reading. If he did that, Fu Beija's affinity would only decrease. Wei Wei Bai sighed. "Time's up. How did I die?" The system said faintly, "You were killed by a bomb dropped from a plane. Maybe the main system thought you were too heartless, but you never failed your side mission, so it couldn't find a reason to strike you with lightning, so it could only make a fuss about how you died." Wei Wei Bai said, "Have you always found me an eyesore? Why do you always make me feel hopeless every time you speak?" The system said, "How can you think like that? Aren't we friends?" Wei Wei Bai said, "Eating from the same bowl doesn't mean we're friends. We could be dogs fighting for food." The system said, "You've lowered yourself to the level of a dog just to diss me. You've never loved me." Wei Wei Bai said, "I didn't even love you. How could I love you?" The system said, "I'm just saying that to stimulate your fighting spirit. How can you ignore my efforts?" Wei Wei Bai said, "I love to hear compliments. You should say more about me." The system said, "What kind of compliments do you like? I'll look for them." Wei Wei Bai said, "Compliment my strengths. I have so many." The system said, "That's true, your strengths," after a long silence. The system said, "Fine. I admit I'm a dog. You don't have any strengths." Wei Wei Bai. The host system fell into deep confusion. Why did I meet such an inhumane, shameless thing in the first place? Wei Wei Bai pulled on his hair to relieve his stress. The system suddenly said, "Your mother is here." Bai Weiwei trembled. What? My mom also transmigrated? Or was she reincarnated? Her mom and dad an age and fourth? The system said, I mean Chenru. Fu Beija's stepmother was also Bai Weiwei's stepmother. Bai Weiwei. Pei, what kind of mother is she? If she really had such a mother, she would have to commit suicide. Otherwise, wouldn't this kind of bad genes be passed on to future generations? Bai Weiwei. What is she doing here? Are you here to take revenge after I knocked your head? The system looked at Chenru's situation and concluded, they are here to show their weakness to you. At the same time, they are also prepared to use force to kidnap you. Weiwei Bai. Kidnap me? I am surrounded by Fu Beija's men. Even if I wanted to kidnap myself, it would be difficult. The system said, Chenru needs a lot of money. Her family lost a lot of money because of business, and she was involved in that. That's why she's so anxious to get you into the family. She wants you to give birth to the child so that she can control the Fu family. Once he was in control of the Fu family and the Fu family's huge assets, any debt would not be a problem. Crossover system. Adonis, come here. Crossover system. Adonis, come here. / crossover system. Adonis, come here. Crossover system. Adonis, come here. Crossover system. Adonis, come here. Chapter 1099. Weiwei Bai's face lit up with joy. You're a good person. I was just worried sick and Philanthropist Chen came to solve my problem. The system. Philanthropist Chen? Weiwei Bai smiled and said, It's too easy for me to give myself away when I plan the kidnapping. Chenru came at the right time. She hates me to the core, so she won't show me any mercy. The system. So, what kind of philanthropist is this? Isn't she an enemy? Weiwei Bai said, It's because of the good karma I've accumulated that I'm able to help you in your hour of need today. The system. You're even using your enemy to attack. Are you a devil? Weiwei Bai asked, Where's Chenru now? The system. She just arrived in the city. I haven't sent her an invitation to visit you yet. Weiwei Bai thought for a moment, then put on a thick and beautiful winter coat and shoes. She then opened the jewelry box that Fu Beija gave her. She carefully selected a set of expensive green jadeite earrings inlaid with gold. The style of the jade was older, but Weiwei Bai's skin was tender. After putting it on, the jade was as green as bamboo after the rain. It looked even better. Weiwei Bai put on a gold bracelet. The system. Are you planning to hang a villa on your body? The jewelry that she was wearing was obviously very expensive. And it was not low-key expensive. Anyone who saw it would think that it was expensive to see rich people. Weiwei Bai was still choosing the ring. The inlaid gems had to be big, and wearing two would make it look expensive. She took a last look at herself in the mirror. She was full of jewels. Even the collar of the winter coat was made of expensive fox fur. If it were anyone else wearing this, their delicate body would be covered by the expensive aura. But Weiwei Bai was fair enough, so fair that she was as cold as snow. Therefore, she forced herself to give off a noble yet clean aura when she wore these gorgeous things. Weiwei Bai slowly adjusted her cuffs.
Do you know?
I want to make a woman who has gone crazy from debt feel even more enmity towards me, and even want to strangle me to death. I want to show off that I'm living a good life, 10,000 times better than her. She was wearing such expensive clothes. Only then could Chenru see her painstaking efforts. The system said, You should accumulate some virtue. Weiwei Bai laughed.
Haha.
Fu Beija would only return at night because of military matters. Weiwei Bai went out, followed by a group of people. She had only taken 2 steps when she suddenly frowned and turned back. She said coldly, There's no need for so many people. I want to go shopping. Are you going to clear the streets? The adjutant hesitated for a moment before nodding and allowing half of the men to return. The remaining half of the people secretly hid and followed her. Weiwei Bai knew that she couldn't chase them away, but there couldn't be too many people following them in such a secretive manner. Chenru should be able to handle it. Weiwei Bai was worried sick about this kidnapping case. The system spent some time to find Chenru's car. The car passed by a street. Wei Wei Bai immediately raised her head and puffed out her chest, trying to let Chenru see her posture. She walked past the car. After a dozen steps, she heard hurried footsteps behind her. Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai lazily turned around, her eyes cold. Chenru was in a hurry and didn't have time to change her clothes. She was travel-worn and looked embarrassed, especially when Wei Wei Bai was so delicate and noble. She looked old and ugly. Wei Wei Bai looked at her from head to toe, her eyes full of ridicule, 7 parts frivolity and 3 parts indifference. The download address is at https://www.
Sashu.
Calmly is at https://m. Sashu. Com/ Chapter 1100. Then she said in a noble and arrogant tone, "Isn't this old Madam Chen? I didn't recognize you when you changed your clothes. Why did you change your style? You're dressed like this."
Ha.
Chenru's smile froze. Her heart was pierced by Wei Wei Bai. She was a vain woman to begin with, and she was used to being flattered by others. But Wei Wei Bai stabbed her like this. It was humiliating. Resentment intertwined into venom, making her tremble in pain. She came to ask for peace, and had no choice but to take this dangerous path. But seeing Wei Wei Bai like this, she couldn't pull her face down. She even wanted her to die. Chenru was so angry that blood was coming out of her chest, but she still smiled gently. "Wei Wei Bai, I saw a woman like you coming to this war-torn place with Beija. I was worried, so I came to see you." Wei Wei Bai said, "Oh," faintly, but the sarcasm on her face didn't change. She raised her finger, revealing the shining gem ring and the golden bracelet. It blinded Chenru. Wei Wei Bai said, "See, I'm doing much better than you, and it will get better in the future. You don't have to worry, you can go back to that old house and wait for death." Chenru couldn't take it anymore. "How can you say that?
I'm your mother-in-law."
Wei Wei Bai waved her hand, making the gem ring more conspicuous. "Yes, yes, yes, mother-in-law." Chenru was so angry that she took 2 steps forward. Wei Wei Bai immediately stepped back. "You're dirty. My clothes are very expensive, and your smell is bad. Don't touch me." Chenru was so angry that she almost died on the spot. The system couldn't bear to look. "Host, you don't even want to say the evil female supporting character. It's too low class." What kind of conversation was this? Chenru was the miserable and pitiful main character. The host was a vicious cannon fodder who was about to die. Wei Wei Bai flipped her hair again, revealing the gold and jade pendant, trying to provoke Chenru to explode. So be it, as long as it's useful. She could see the vicious hatred in Chenru's eyes. If it was not so exciting, when would Chenru kidnap her? He would probably approach her in a pitiful and tender manner. After all, no one would walk onto a dead end until they reached the final step. And offending Fu Beija was undoubtedly the most terrifying path to take. Wei Wei Bai did this to tell Chenru. It was useless for her to play with him, forcing her into a dead end. Wei Wei Bai saw that she was almost done provoking her. She looked at her coldly and arrogantly. "All right, that's enough reminiscing. I'm leaving. Beija dotes on me. He doesn't want me to go out for too long." With that, Wei Wei Bai turned around and left. When she turned around, Chenru's face twisted with resentment. This was the first time she hated a woman so much. She had married handsome Fu, a man of a higher status than Fu Beija. But in the end, he ended up like this. Why could Wei Wei Bai get Fu Beija's love and live such a life of luxury? She was the one who let Wei Wei Bai marry into the family. Wei Wei Bai was simply an ungrateful wretch. She did not know how to be grateful at all. She even took away her military order. The more Chenru thought about it, the more she felt that Wei Wei Bai was the enemy who took everything away from her. She wanted to soften Wei Wei Bai and please Wei Wei Bai so that she would believe in her. But now, she was disappearing bit by bit. She wanted Wei Wei Bai to die.
Die now.
Chenru gave a secret signal to the people in the car. Then she quickly chased after them and shouted to Wei Bai, Wei Bai, I just came here. Can I stay at your place? I'll stay for 2 or 3 days before leaving. Chapter 1101. Wei Bai walked in a circle towards a place with many blind spots. Once there were many blind spots, the bodyguards behind her would not be able to see her. Finally, she came to a special area that was some distance away from the bodyguards behind her. She turned around and saw Chenru running towards her, panting. She needed a bigger surprise to get Chenru to kidnap her. Otherwise, she would be intercepted by Fu Beige's men before the kidnapping was successful. Wei Bai felt that she must be the first person in the world who tried so hard to make the kidnapper succeed. When Chenru saw Wei Bai stop, a trace of ecstasy flashed through her heart. She gritted her teeth, the coldness and hatred in her eyes emerging. Her friendly expression was especially ferocious. She rushed a few steps forward and immediately grabbed Wei Bai's hand. Wei Bai frowned and looked at her in surprise. Chenru cried, Wei, I'm your mother-in-law. How can you bear to see me sleeping in the open? Wei Bai was about to speak. Suddenly, there was an explosion. Out of nowhere, a grenade was thrown into the next room. The house exploded, and she was affected by the explosion. She felt the burning heat and staggered. She was almost knocked down by the force of the attack. Chenru's face flashed a trace of ecstasy. The plan worked. A few men ran out of the thick smoke and then grabbed Wei Bai and ran forward. A black car rushed out. They immediately stuffed Wei Bai into the car. In the thick smoke, the bodyguards behind Wei Bai also rushed out, but they were not fast enough. Wei Bai was already out of sight. The bodyguards protecting Wei Bai looked at each other, their faces pale. Fu Beija, who received the news, immediately stood up. The officers following him looked at him in surprise. Fu Beija's cold face was covered with a layer of frost. His eyes were red with anger. He pulled a safety off the gun and coldly said, Put on your weapons. The officer behind him immediately asked, Are we going to war? Fu Beija's murderous aura was ice cold. Open your head. This daddy's woman has been kidnapped. It seems that I was too merciful. Once you catch them, kill them without mercy. The officer immediately responded, Yes, young marshal. On the other hand, Li Xinghe was planning how to defend against Fu Beija. Both armies were eyeing each other covetously, and a war could break out at any moment. The situation was not optimistic. Suddenly, Fu Beija's army received the order and retreated. The situation was so good that Li Xinghe's chances of winning were not high. Fu Beija had been planning for so long, and he was just a step away from occupying a more advantageous position. They had actually retreated. Could it be a different type of trap? Li Xinghe fell into deep thought and then asked someone to find out what happened to Fu Beija. The officers on this side were all happy. If Fu Beija's side retreated at this time, then we would be able to occupy a more advantageous position. We will immediately attack now. Li Xinghe also nodded, thinking that it was very reasonable. The adjutant who had been asking around for a while finally rushed in happily. Governor, Fu Beija is crazy. He didn't even want to fight because of a woman. Li Xinghe did not know how to react. What woman? The adjutant said happily, It's Fu Beija's wife. I heard that she was kidnapped by her enemies. Fu Beija was greatly affected and sent all his elites to rescue her. Now that there is only an empty shell over there, we should quickly start the war. Li Xinghe's face immediately turned pale. Wei? The adjutant was overjoyed. Li Xinghe immediately ticked away the overjoyed adjutant, pulled out his gun, and roared, Bring the weapons, let's go. The rest of the officers were stunned. Where are we going? Are we going to attack? Li Xinghe turned around with a murderous look. Where else can we go? We're going to save my childhood sweetheart. Chapter 1102. Wei Bai was tied to a chair. It was an old and run-down warehouse. Every kidnapping location was always such a rundown place. Wei Wei Bai thought that the villains were too poor. Couldn't they just go to a hotel and get a few rooms, and then negotiate while everyone drank and ate a luxurious lunch? After all, she was a project with 10 boxes of gold bars. There was no food, no drink, and the place was dirty and messy. The kidnappers of this batch could not keep up with the times. Wei Wei Bai chatted with the system. When Fu Beija comes, remember to tell me. The system said, what if he doesn't come? Wei Wei Bai said, 95 points of affinity. If he doesn't come, I'll live stream myself eating affinity points. Was her strategy for so long fake? How could he not come? The system said, okay, he's here. He came quickly, and he came with an army. The villains looked miserable, with less than 100 people. Their weapons were shabby, with only a box of bombs and half a box of grenades. Guns were not the same as Fu Beija. Wei Wei Bai quickly looked around and found that Chenru did not know that she had been exposed. She was still chatting and laughing with the people who had come with him outside the door. She thought that the gold bars would be in her bag. Chenru thought that once she got the money, she would kill the hostage. Then she would escape abroad, and Fu Beija would not be able to catch her. Women had long hair but short wit. She thought that her plan was flawless. She did not know how many eyes there were in the city. She brought 100 people with her, and even the passers-by did not have time to notice. But people from all walks of life, beggars and peddlers, had sharp eyes. Chenru had not even called Fu Beija to ask for the ransom. When Fu Beija cleaned up the city, those eyes came back and forth like surveillance cameras. They had already told her about Chenru's whereabouts. Wei Wei Bai listened to the system and calculated the time. If Fu Beija were to come here directly, Chenru would be standing at the door. Fu Beija was also a daring and merciless person. He immediately shot at Chenru and killed her. Then, the army marched over. Chenru's men were probably all dead. At that time, as a hostage, she would not be of any use at all. This kidnapping would be resolved by Fu Beija. Wei Wei Bai was exasperated. There weren't many villains who could do it. She only had about a day and a half left. If today's excitement wasn't enough, then there would be no chance for them to continue. Wei Wei Bai thought hard about the plan, and then she lowered her eyes. Her feet were not tied, so she kicked away the broken chair beside her. The sound startled Chenru. She immediately walked in with a scowl. What's wrong, young mistress? Are you running away? Wei Wei Bai immediately put on a face that was asking for a beating. I'm hungry. Chenru sneered. Do you really think you're a big shot? Am I your servant? She took a big step forward and grabbed her chin, glaring at her angrily. Wei Wei Bai, you're in my hands now. If I want you to live, you'll live. If I want you to die, you'll die. Who do you think you are? Even if you're hungry, you'd better hold it in. Bai Wei Wei's face was unafraid. The corner of her mouth curled into a sneer of contempt. You really don't dare to do anything to me. I'm your money tree now. Beija loves me so much. I'm worth a lot of money. Chenru was shocked. She said that she was worth a lot of money.
How could she say that?
/ you'll see it the next time you open the bookshelf. If you like. Chapter 1103. What Happened to the Gentle and Virtuous Girl? Bai Wei Wei leisurely glanced around again. Besides, you left me alone in the warehouse while everyone else is guarding outside. Beija's soldiers are all experienced in the battlefield. He will shoot all of you as soon as he comes. I'll be fine even if all of you die. Chenru was shocked. Yes, that made sense. She immediately turned around and shouted, 20 people come in. Pull out your weapons and point them at Wei Wei Bai. Don't let Fu Beija have a chance to attack. Wei Wei Bai raised her eyebrows and snorted. It's useless even if you point your guns at me. You better put the bombs around the warehouse and threaten Beija when you see him. If he wants to save me, you will detonate the bombs and die together with him. Chenru trembled. But what if the bombs hit us? Wei Wei Bai sneered. Why are you such a coward? You know how powerful Beija is. If I don't do that, I won't be able to scare him.
Chenru thought about it.
Yes, that made sense. She immediately turned around and shouted, "Quick, bury the bombs." Wei Wei Bai added, "Besides, you're so calm. How will Beija believe that you're serious? You better get a whip or something. You can whip me and ask for money. I'm sure you can get it."
Chenru thought about it.
That was exactly what she wanted. She didn't like this little shameless girl. She couldn't be more satisfied with whipping her weight, who would let others whip them. Chenru's face darkened. "What's your motive? Why are you telling me this?" Wei Wei Bai looked at her. She wasn't that stupid. Her face changed immediately. Fear appeared on her pale face. She was about to cry. "I'm afraid that you'll kill me. You can let me go if you get the money." She started crying as she spoke. "You have to let me go. I'll ask Bei should I give you the money." Chenru was relieved to see such a stupid and cowardly girl. It was human nature to be afraid of death. Wei Wei Bai's behavior was normal, and her brain wasn't working well. He actually pointed out all of their flaws. This would allow them to better guard against Fu Beija. She was indeed an inexperienced woman. Chenru sneered. "Beg me then." Wei Wei Bai cried, "Will you let me go if I beg you?" Chenru, "How is that possible?" Wei Wei Bai's expression immediately turned cold. She no longer looked as timid as before. "Then why should I beg you? It's a waste of time." Chenru, Wei Wei Bai had really put in a lot of effort so that the villains could succeed. The system said, "Li Xinghe is here too." Wei Wei Bai asked, "What is he doing here?" The system said, "Save the childhood friend." Wei Wei Bai, "Even the side quests don't make me worry." She had already completed the side quests, but Li Xinghe still came to cause trouble. As soon as Fu Beija saw Li Xinghe, he lost his temper and didn't care about increasing his affinity. Wei Wei Bai leaned her head on the chair and said weakly, "System, why don't you just send me to heaven with a grenade and forget about this strategy?" The system said, "Don't be sad. You've been working so hard for so long, you're just one step away." Wei Wei Bai said, "This step is so big that I feel like I'm going to pull on my balls. The pressure is making my hair fall out." The system said, "Don't you still have me by your side? I'm your little angel of positive energy, the sunflower that shines on your little world." Wei Wei Bai was so disgusted that tears almost fell out of her eyes. The pressure is even greater. The system still had a bad mouth. At least it wasn't disgusting. The next time you open the bookshelf, you'll see it. If you like the... Chapter 1104. Chenru was also afraid of Fu Beija. After all, she had seen Fu Beija's methods. Everyone was afraid of him. That cruel and callous look of his had scared countless people to tears. Chenru arranged everything. Bombs, hostages, everything was ready. She was about to call Fu Beija. However, she did not give the order. The people guarding outside were already afraid of running in. "Madam, there are so many people outside. It's just a kidnapping, but the army is here." Chenru's heart sank when she heard this. She also heard that Fu Beija was on the battlefield. She thought that Fu Beija liked Wei Wei Bai. He could only come himself or ask his adjutant to come. After all, every inch of land in war was an inch of blood. A man who conquered the world would not give up the war to save Wei Wei Bai. Chenru immediately ran to the door and saw countless soldiers in front of her. What was more frightening was that she heard the roar of an airplane. The car that led the way was a sedan. The car stopped, and a man opened the door. He was dressed in military uniform, and his eyes were as cold and sharp as a hawk's. He got out of the car. It was Fu Beija. He pulled out his gun, pursed his lips, and unlocked the safety expressionlessly. Then his voice was terrifyingly cold. "Surround this place for this daddy." Chenru's world turned dark when she heard this. She immediately ran into the warehouse, trembling. Behind her, the people she brought with her shouted in fear, "The army is here again." Chenru looked back in shock and saw a huge army in the distance. She could not see the number of soldiers. At first glance, it was obvious that they were well-trained and cold-blooded elite soldiers. Chenru's legs almost turned to jelly. What was going on?
It was just a kidnapping.
Or did they kidnap in the wrong place? The outside had become a battlefield. Wei Wei Bai heard that Li Xinghe and Fu Beige's army met outside the warehouse. Like Chenru, her eyes were about to turn dark. This time, it was not her who provoked Fu Beige. It was Li Xinghe. The two of them were already fighting. In the end, they all ran to the warehouse at the same time. Didn't they just change the battlefield and continue fighting? At that time, it would be strange if Fu Beige's favorability increased. His attention would be drawn away by Li Xinghe. As expected, the soldiers outside began to run madly. Set up the cannons. Quick, dig a trench and pile up the soil. There are a lot of infantrymen on the other side. This is the tempo of a direct battle. Li Xinghe wasn't much better off. Their governor had come to rescue his childhood sweetheart. He was up against Fu Beige again. That was why the war between the North and the South was so intense. Was it because of Wei Wei Bai? Fu Beige saw Li Xinghe occupying the other side of the warehouse. Both sides were on the defensive. The atmosphere was like a tiger watching its prey, ready to erupt at any moment. Fu Beige sneered. Li Xinghe, is it your turn to save my woman? Your intentions are so obvious.
Don't be so shameless.
Wei Wei was already his wife. Li Xinghe was still so brazenly coveting it. He might as well get rid of him today so that he wouldn't be cuckolded by this guy in the future. Li Xinghe didn't look good, but his voice was calm. I'm Wei Wei's friend. We've been friends for many years. We're childhood friends who depend on each other. We're even soul friends who have gone through life and death together. Why can't I save her when she's in trouble? A narrow-minded man like you isn't worthy of her. Fu Beige's heart twitched. Friends for many years, childhood friends, soul friends. He even said that he was repaying a debt of gratitude. This was simply mental derailment. Fu Beige was furious. He directly fired at Li Xinghe. It doesn't matter if I'm not worthy of her. I'll kill everyone who's worthy of her so that she can only choose me. Li Xinghe dodged, and the officer protecting Li Xinghe immediately pulled out his gun and opened fire. The bullets from both sides started to crackle. Chenru was trembling. She was afraid that the helicopter above would drop a bomb and blow the warehouse up. Wei Wei Bai's face was filled with despair. Let Li Xinghe and Fu Beige fight each other. How could they fight each other? The two men outside were already in a killing frenzy. They even forgot that she was kidnapped. The system said, "How about you take the initiative to attack?" Wei Wei Bai was silent for a while. Suddenly, he kicked Chenru's butt. Chenru jumped up in shock. What are you doing? Wei Wei Bai roared. Idiot, do you want to live or not? Quickly point your gun at my head and push me to the door. Chenru thought of the battle outside, and her hands trembled. She couldn't even hold the gun properly. Wei Wei Bai encouraged her. Do you have any experience in kidnapping? How can you earn money if you're so scared? How can you live a good life? How can you sell jewelry and wear fancy clothes abroad? Don't waste time. Go out and threaten them. Chenru was at a loss and could only follow Wei Wei Bai's words. She pulled out her gun and pointed it at Wei Wei Bai's head. Then, she hid behind Wei Wei Bai and let her go to the door. The two sides were fighting to the fullest. They didn't see Wei Wei Bai at all. Wei Wei Bai said, "Shout something." Chenru stuttered. Shout? Shout what? Wei Wei Bai was angry and roared. What else can you shout? Everyone stop. If you don't stop, I'll pay you or you'll kill me. The threat was loud and clear. The battlefield was silent for a while. Li Xinghe and Fu Beige suddenly remembered something. At the same time, they turned around and saw Wei Wei Bai at the door. They seemed to be here to save someone.
Slash.
Chapter 1105. Everyone and all the guns were aimed at Wei Wei Bai and Chenru at the door at almost the same time. Chenru's fingers were trembling nonstop. She was also inexperienced and had never seen so many guns pointed at her. She didn't even know how to speak. Wei Wei Bai really wanted to lift Chenru up and shake her. Villain, why are your legs so weak? Rise up, be angry, explode. Hurry up and threaten and abuse her. Otherwise, where would the gold bars and favorability come from? Wei Wei Bai was really angered by this villain. She gritted her teeth and said in a low voice, "Steady your hands, hide behind me, and don't show your head." Otherwise, Fu Beija, that sharpshooter, would be able to shoot Chenru in the head with one shot. Chenru's voice was choked with sobs. "I was wrong. I won't do it again. I'll let you go. Can you let me go?" In such a big situation, she was really scared. Wei Wei Bai gritted her teeth and said in a low voice, "If you dare to put down the gun, I'll immediately turn you into a sieve. You better change your attitude as a kidnapper. When your seniors see you like this, they won't be able to hold on to their coffins." Chenru felt that both the hostage and the person who came to save the hostage were very scary. She really made a mistake that caused everlasting regret. Being threatened by Wei Wei Bai, Chenru endured the humiliation and shouted, "Wei Wei Bai is in my hands. If you dare to touch her, I'll kill her." Wei Wei Bai immediately played along, and her face turned pale. Her fingers were clenched nervously, and her brows were furrowed. Her expression was indescribably soft and fragile. But she said coldly, "Don't worry about me. She won't shoot." Chenru really didn't dare to shoot. If she had the thought of holding Wei Wei Bai hostage to threaten Fu Beija before, she would have been scared. She was scared out of her wits by Fu Beija's army. Not to mention that Li Xinghe also came with an army. She knew very well that if anything happened to Wei Wei Bai in her hands, she would not be able to escape the country. She would die a horrible death on the spot. She still had a long life ahead of her, so she couldn't bear to die. He really wanted to throw the gun away. However, Wei Wei Bai refused to let her throw it away. She was simply a demon. Fu Beija waved his hand and asked everyone to put down their guns. He looked at Chenru expressionlessly and said, "Let her go, and I'll let you live." Chenru almost nodded. Wei Wei Bai held her hand tightly, and Chenru was about to cry. She was now in a difficult position. Whether she put down the gun or not, there was no way out. Fu Beija reached into his pocket and put the gun into his pocket. His posture was cold and tense as he looked at the gun that was placed on Wei Wei Bai's head. His heart skipped a beat. Chenru's hands were shaking, and he could feel it. Chenru did not have much experience in handling guns. If she was not careful, the gun could easily go off. This was a mistake that novices were particularly prone to make. And this mistake was something that he couldn't bear. Fu Beija resisted the trembling and suppressed his violent rage. His face was gloomy and calm. "I'll give you a choice. First, you let Wei Wei go, and I'll give you a box of gold bars, and I promise that I won't trouble you in the future." This choice was simply too tempting. Chenru was tempted. She knew that Fu Beija always valued promises, so she could still believe his words. Then she heard Fu Beija's voice, as cold as snow. "Second, you hurt her, and I'll kill your whole family in the most vicious way." Chenru had a weakness, and that was that she valued her family. When she heard this, her face turned pale. "Fu Beija, don't threaten me with my family." Fu Beija was desperately attacking her family. This was the reason why she had completely lost her mind and kidnapped Wei Wei Bai. Chapter 1106. The hatred in her heart was mostly directed at Fu Beija. Fu Beija's face was so cold that he looked like an emotionless statue. Only his eyes were filled with venomous murderous aura. "You are the one who used my family to threaten me first." The place of home in his heart was only left for Wei Wei Bai. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 96. The sky darkened and the wind became colder. Light snow began to fall. Wei Wei Bai wasn't wearing thick clothes, and every time it snowed, she had trouble breathing. Fu Beija saw the snow fall from her hair, and his face became even paler. His heart felt like it was being dug out, and it hurt. With such careful protection, he thought that he could leave her and fight for his own world. But in less than half a day, she fell into a trap. Fu Beija realized for the first time that he was surrounded by dangers. And he was the one who pulled Wei Wei Bai into this whirlpool. The first day she was about to enter the family. He knew that the Fu family was a wolf's den. Even at that time, he let her enter the family with evil intentions. He wanted her to pay the price for her arrogance. But today, all that was left in his heart was a heavy guilt and a painful pity. He was used to being attacked in the open and in the dark. When he fell in love with a person, he found that the things he was used to were fatal to her. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 97. Wei Wei Bai and the system. The two systems were dumbfounded. He shouted twice in the middle, but Wei Wei Bai didn't do anything awkward. What was Fu Beija thinking? He actually increased the favorability twice. Wei Wei Bai decided to throw away this doubt. She continued to calmly wait for the right time. She looked at the snow falling from the sky. The system said, "Li Xinghe is approaching you." Wei Wei Bai frowned. She immediately knew why Fu Beija was stalling for time. Unexpectedly, it was to give Li Xinghe time to save people. The two men who were fighting to the death just now actually had such a good tacit understanding. They cooperated to save people without any hint. Bai Weiwei was just about to remind Chenru, but she opened her mouth and immediately closed it. She couldn't remind him. Now that everyone's attention was on her, it would be abnormal for her to speak in a low voice. This kidnapping case was a complete failure, although her favorability had increased by 2 points. However, in the remaining time, it was basically impossible to increase it to 100. Weiwei Bai calmly said, "Tongzi, if my strategy fails, can I return to reality?" Although the system said that it was possible. However, she had never failed before, so she was not very confident. The system was silent for a while. During this period of silence, it was actually very solemn. Weiwei Bai instinctively felt that something was wrong, but the system said seriously, "I'm here. If you fail, I can escort you back to reality. It'll be fine, don't be afraid." Even if it risked being killed by the main system, it would also drag Weiwei Bai's soul through the soul channel that might be broken. Before she died, it would die before her. Weiwei Bai didn't know why, but her heart was filled with a surge of emotion. The system's mouth was poisonous, but it was still very loyal to its friends. The system continued, "So seeing how beautiful I am, it's better that you don't fail." Weiwei Bai. Could it make her feel touched for more than 3 seconds? Chenru hesitated again and again, but still couldn't withstand the pressure and said, "Can you guarantee that I can leave safely?" Fu Beija looked at her gloomily. His voice was so calm that there was a sharp killing intent. "Yes, I can guarantee that you can leave safely. The download address is at https://www.
Sashu.com.
Chapter 1107. His promise was real, but it had a time limit. Before Weiwei Bai was safe, he could fulfill any promise he made. Chenru thought of Fu Beija's past examples of keeping promises and felt a little more confident. She looked back and forth at Fu Beija several times before she finally made up her mind and was about to put down the gun in her hand. Li Xinghe, who had been waiting for a long time, suddenly appeared beside her and reached out to grab the gun. Weiwei Bai was pushed away by Li Xinghe. She looked back and saw Li Xinghe ruthlessly kicking Chenru in the stomach and grabbing the gun in her hand, looking like he was about to take the gun away. Because of the sharp pain, Chenru nervously pulled the trigger. And that gun was aimed at Weiwei Bai. Weiwei Bai only felt that this was a terrible development. Was she going to die early? But in the next moment, a tall shadow threw himself on top of her. His heavy and warm chest hugged her petite body, blocking all the danger. Weiwei Bai was pressed to the ground by him. She opened her eyes wide and saw Fu Beija's worried face. He reached out to hold her face. The worry in his eyes was obvious. "Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" he asked anxiously. The calm appearance, just now, was completely shattered. Now Fu Beija's eyes were red and his lips were trembling. Fear finally made him unable to maintain his usual indifference. Wei Wei Bai's face was pinched by him, and she vaguely said, "I'm okay, don't worry." Fu Beija saw that she was so energetic, and his body suddenly relaxed. He smiled. "It's good that you're okay." Wei Wei Bai felt that his body was getting heavier and heavier. Fu Beija's eyes began to lose focus. "It's good that you're okay." At this moment of relaxation, he finally completely woke up. She was the person he couldn't leave. He would rather die than let her be hurt. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at 98. It was only then that Wei Wei Bai realized that his chest had started to bleed. The bullet came from the back, and right in the heart. The target is dead? It was Wei Wei Bai's first time encountering such a situation. No matter how calm she was, she couldn't react in time. Li Xinghe, who had knocked Shenru out with a kick, turned around and saw what was happening. His expression immediately changed, and he ran over. He reached out and pulled Fu Beija up. Wei Wei Bai shouted, "Don't touch him." Li Xinghe paused. Wei Wei. Wei Wei Bai sat up from the ground. Her fingers trembled as she touched Fu Beija's face. She was barely breathing. The system also reminded him that the target's death was counting down. "He's going to die, host." The system's expression was heavy as well. The panic in Wei Wei Bai's eyes was forcefully suppressed. She suddenly said, "Li Xinghe, you guard outside and leave the warehouse to me. I want to save him." Li Xinghe knew that she had medical skills, but Fu Beija couldn't hold on. This kind of injury, no matter who came, it would be useless. Li Xinghe's mouth was clumsy. He didn't know what to say. In the end, he was defeated by Wei Wei Bai's stubborn gaze. He immediately evacuated the crowd and told people to guard the warehouse. Then he carried Fu Beija into the warehouse. Wei Wei Bai looked at Fu Beija on the ground. She squatted down and then said to Li Xinghe, "You go out. Don't let anyone come in." Li Xinghe looked at her thin back. She seemed so lonely at this moment. She whispered, "Go out. I only trust you now." Li Xinghe's chest tightened. He nodded and then walked out without hesitation. She trusted him. He was worth it. Wei Wei Bai looked at Fu Beija, whose chest was full of blood, and her fingers were trembling from nervousness. Chapter 1108. Her targets were always strong, so strong that she could only rely on self-torture to gain favorability. This was the first time she encountered a target that died before her. Except for conquering ghosts, she said, "Tongzi, my medical box still has 2 chances to save a life. Is it useful?" The box was referring to the chances to save a life. It did not mean that opening it would definitely save a person. The system said, "In theory, it's useful.
Try it."
After all, the reward was an incomplete product that it found, so it did not dare to be too confident. Wei Wei Bai said, "I hid the medical box under the bed in the house. I won't be able to get it in time." The system said, "It's okay, I'll get it for you." The system had restrictions on taking other things, but it was originally the system's. It could take it directly. Soon, the box appeared in front of Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai opened it without hesitation. As expected, it was another set of scalpels and the operation process. It was too difficult. Wei Wei Bai knew that the operation process was not something she could do. She had no choice but to open the box again. At the end of the box was a pair of surgical gloves. They were very thin gloves. The system immediately said, "Put them on quickly. This pair of gloves is a beginner's guide. Once you put them on, they will automatically help you with the operation." Wei Wei Bai immediately put them on. It seemed that the life-saving reward was very reliable. Wei Wei Bai began to operate on Fu Beija. He was on the verge of death. For this kind of wound, even in the modern operating theater, it would take the best of the best to operate on it, and it would take a lot of effort to succeed. Her operation process was a reward from the system. That was why it was so advanced, even more advanced than modern times. However, the operation had risks, and it was not 100% successful. For the first time, Wei Wei Bai experienced this feeling of extreme tension. She held his life in her hands. The gloves automatically controlled her hands, and her fingers steadily cut open his clothes, skin, and flesh without a trace of trembling, finally revealing the bullet wound. Due to the correct surgical method, not much blood flowed out. It only stained her fingers. The bullet was slowly removed, followed by a series of surgeries. Finally, the flesh was sewn back together. The surgery was finally completed, but his heart had stopped beating. The operation failed. Her hands were stained with Fu Beige's blood. She sat beside him in a daze. The snow outside the window flew in. He felt a sudden chill. Wei Wei Bai reached out and slowly touched Fu Beige's eyes. Rest in peace. She actually managed to kill the target of her strategy. As expected, being a doctor was not a job that humans could do. Suddenly, something soft swept past her palm. Wei Wei Bai paused and moved her hand away in a daze, only to see Fu Beige open his eyes and look at her like a zombie. Wei Wei Bai trembled. You. Fu Beige suddenly used all his strength to reach out and hug her. I'm fine. When he was hit by the bullet, he thought he was dead. The cold darkness kept pulling him down, but he still had consciousness. He vaguely knew that there was someone constantly saving him. That desperate desire to keep him alive, he could feel it. He continued to climb up until he finally opened his eyes. Then he saw her sitting beside him. A hazy light shrouded her petite figure, and white snowflakes fell on her body. Her hands were stained with blood from saving him, and her eyes were filled with grief and pain. At this moment, he actually felt happy. The person desperately trying to keep him alive was her. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 99. Chapter 1109. When Li Xinghe entered the room, he saw Wei Wei Bai sitting and Fu Beige quietly leaning his head on her thighs. Wei Wei Bai lowered her head and whispered something. Li Xinghe stood at the door in a daze. He actually did not think that Wei Wei Bai could save Fu Beige. But when he saw her hands covered in blood, holding Fu Beige so gently, and the man on her thighs looking at her with a pair of dark and gentle eyes, his heart was overwhelmed by an unbearable pain. This feeling made him grit his teeth and bear with it. Then, he walked over with a calm expression. Fu Beige opened his eyes tiredly, but his vigilance was still there. When Li Xinghe came up, his eyes had become especially sharp. Li Xinghe sighed. All right, let's stop fighting for now. With your current state, I won't win honorably. Fu Beige sneered. He really could not stand Li Xinghe's personality. So fussy. If he had this kind of opportunity to kill his enemy, he would be very happy. The more miserable his enemy was, the happier he would be. Of course, if Li Xinghe wanted to let him go, he would gladly accept. When he killed him in the future, it would be fine as long as he did not let him die too miserably. Wei Wei Bai looked up at Li Xinghe. He really was a sunny and warm man. The system's choice had never been wrong, especially when it was specifically for her. Wei Wei Bai's voice was a little hoarse. Her body was also very tired after such a series of torment. Can you carry him to the car? Li Xinghe frowned. Fu Beige's eyelids twitched. The system secretly ate a melon. Fu Beige frowned and coldly said, Go and call the adjutant to carry me. Li Xinghe glanced at Fu Beige, but quietly bent down, reached under his knees, and directly carried him in a princess carry. Wei Wei Bai and the system said, Oh ho. Fu Beige looked at Li Xinghe murderously. Li Xinghe's expression did not look good either. If you don't hug her like this, the wound will split open. I will fulfill all of Wei Wei's requests. It was rare for Wei Wei Bai to ask him for something. He couldn't wait to give her his heart. Hugging Fu Beige was nothing. Fu Beige's body stiffened. He had no strength to struggle at all. He said, Put me down. If he was carried out by Li Xinghe, his reputation would be even worse. Besides, you won't die if you carry me.
Li Xinghe walked out step by step.
His face was incomparably inflexible. No, you are Wei Wei's husband in name. If something happens to your body, Wei Wei will have to take care of you for the rest of your life. Don't drag her down. Fu Beija said angrily. Go away, we are husband and wife in name. Li Xinghe's footsteps paused. A trace of sadness flashed in his eyes, but he quickly suppressed it. He did not dare to let Wei Wei Bai see anything wrong. He said, then you have to protect yourself even more. Don't trouble Wei Wei because of the pain here and there. If something really happens to your body, die quickly. When his father was shot by Fu Beija and was bedridden, the people taking care of him were very tired. Li Xinghe hated Fu Beija. But in front of Wei Wei Bai, he could not kill Fu Beija. This was because he did not want Wei Wei Bai to hate him. When she thought of him in the future, she would be happy and feel that he was a childhood friend and a very good brother. He would be very satisfied. As for Fu Beija, there were many opportunities to kill him. There was no need to rush to kill him now. Fu Beija and Li Xinghe's state of mind were very similar. They were as confident as a puzzle. They both felt that they could kill each other. Wei Wei Bai was just about to struggle to get up when the system said, Do you want to leave early? Chapter 11:10. Don't we still have time? There was still tomorrow, and they would leave the day after tomorrow. The system said, the main system will attack you the day after tomorrow, and I don't know what method it will use to make the grenade fall on your head. It might be a weapon like an airplane. Wei Wei Bai thought for a while, You're saying that I'll bring harm to the people around me. The system said, the range of the grenade is quite large and you might be next to Fu Beija, so the two of you can die together. Wei Wei Bai said, Favorability is only 99. The system said, Walk to the door. Wei Wei Bai? ? She obediently and slowly walked to the door. Cold snowflakes hit her face. She blinked and heard the system say, Call out to Fu Beija. Wei Wei Bai trusted the system, although she did not know what it wanted to do. Fu Beija. Under the snowflakes, she leaned against the door, looking calm and tired. Her voice was soft and sweet. It was indescribably pleasant. Fu Beija was just put in the car by Li Xinghe, and the door was open. He turned to look at her. The system said, Smile. Wei Wei Bai smiled. It was a pure smile, without a trace of reluctance, and her eyes were more delicate and clean than the snow. It was a very simple smile. Fu Beija's eyes softened, and he stretched out his hand. Let's go back. Wei Wei Bai nodded. The system said again, I love you. Wei Wei Bai was stunned, and was silent for a while. Her long hair was stained by the snowflakes, and she put her hand by the door, and finally opened her mouth. I love you. Fu Beija was stunned. He did not know why she would suddenly confess under such circumstances. But he could not stop the joy, and it made his haggard face brighten up. He was used to being shameless, so his face was still burning red. Fu Beija's chest was very painful. His heart was beating too fast after the surgery. But this kind of pain made him feel especially satisfied. His lips trembled. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 100. The system said, for the male lead to reach 100 favorability points from 99%, it's already a matter of course. A simple confession will do. This was the last time he used the heartwarming strategy. Wei Wei Bai was about to nod in agreement with the system. The roaring flames cover her vision, and then the sky was filled with darkness. The host has suffered heavy injuries. The mission is complete. Immediately leave this plane. Leave successfully. The bomb planted by Chunru was detonated. The range of the explosion was not large. It was in the warehouse. Wei Wei Bai, who was standing at the door, was immediately engulfed by the flames. Fu Beija's pupils shrank to the size of needles. The words in his lips trembled violently. Me too, I love you too. Wei Wei. The shrill scream made one's scalp go numb. He almost jumped out of the car. His hands clawed at the snow and desperately crawled forward. The flames in the warehouse were hot and bright in the white snow, and all the moths were instantly turned into ashes. Fu Beija almost crawled to the door, his hands grabbing the scorching flames. But there was none. His hands hurt to the bone. But he could not grab anything. The adjutant behind him reacted and immediately rushed over to hold Fu Beija, not letting him go in to die. Put out the fire, save the madam. This sentence was futile. Everyone knew that Wei Wei Bai was gone. The system saw the chaos below, Fu Beija's painful expression, and Li Xinghe's panic of losing his mind and asking people to put out the fire. Chapter 11:11. It looked at Fu Beija blankly for a while, and there was a hint of struggle in its eyes. But soon its eyes returned to calmness, and even coldness. It held a ball of soul light in its hands. This ball of light was a lot bigger, and it was Wei Wei Bai's. From the first plane, the light was so weak that it could die at any time. Now it had a lot of light balls. Its mood was finally better. Suddenly, it looked up at the fate roulette, and then at the soul channel. A powerful force that did not belong to this world suddenly came to the plane world. The system quickly bowed its head, sneaked through the soul channel, and ran to the real world. If Wei Wei Bai stayed in this plane for another day, she would be found by the main system. That was why it let her leave quickly. Its action of stealing the main system's data still aroused the vigilance of the main system. The main system, which had been sleeping for a long time, separated its spiritual sense to check whether there was a problem with the world. The system ran fast, so the main system did not find it and Wei Wei Bai. It safely passed through a disaster. The system carefully put Wei Wei Bai's soul back into her body. Then it reached out and gently tapped her forehead. What's wrong with eating more of your snacks? You're fat. If I don't eat more, I can't hold you. Suddenly the system was alert. It immediately shrank into a ball and hid again. Yi Xuan seemed to be aware of something. He looked up again at Wei Wei Bai's head, his eyes calm and scrutinizing. It wasn't out of curiosity or doubt, but calm observation. Qin Xiu hurried over. I say, how many things did you bring to the field trip? Even if you want to go out for Wei Wei to bask in the sun, you don't need to bring a box of glucose bottles. As he spoke, he began to familiarize himself with the intravenous strip to hang the glucose. Then he finished for Wei Wei Bai. Usually, when she was asleep, all kinds of medical equipment to supplement nutrition were indispensable. But unexpectedly, Yi Xuan patted his head and said that the scenery in the suburbs was good. Wei Wei Bai had been in a deep sleep. Not being able to see her would affect her physical and mental health. He had been in a deep sleep all this time, so why would he care about the suburbs? Pushing it to the door to bask in the sun would have the same effect. He also brought a set of medical equipment and various daily necessities. Was this an outing, or was he preparing to stay in the suburbs? Qin Xiu nagged while working. Yi Xuan took the blanket and covered Wei Wei Bai with it. The weather was cold, and he was afraid that she would not feel well. Yi Xuan suddenly said calmly, "Do you see something on Wei Wei's head?" Qin Xiu blankly looked up at Wei Wei Bai's head. There was nothing. He then looked at Wei Wei Bai's hair and said doubtfully, "Did you see her dandruff? Didn't you wash her hair every day? Her hair is clean and smells good." Yi Xuan's calm expression turned cold. He looked at Qin Xiu with dark eyes. Qin Xiu retreated a dozen steps, for fear of being beaten by Yi Xuan. He can't beat him. Yi Xuan glanced at Wei Wei Bai's head again and said to himself, "It seems that only I can see it." Above her head, in the void, there was a golden, incomplete light. What was that? Yi Xuan calmly analyzed it, but he had no idea. He felt that his knowledge reserve was not enough. Although he had searched for a lot of information during this time, he still had no clue. He was impatient, curious, and he didn't have these emotions. But when it came to Wei Wei Bai, his calm heart still surged with a strong desire to solve it. The download address is at https://www. Sashu. Calm the. Chapter 11:12. These golden fragments are likely to have something to do with her being in a deep sleep. After Qin Xiu finished moving things, He saw the life assistant, the president's secretary, and so on standing in another place, making lunch. He had nothing to do, so he found something to say. You haven't been dreaming recently. You haven't come to me for counseling. The strange dreams that Yi Yuxuan had before were super scary. In particular, he felt that every time Yi Yuxuan talked about dreams, his whole person would change. Even a little bit of schizophrenia. But this schizophrenia would soon be controlled by Yi Yuxuan himself, and he would return to normal. And after returning to normal, he felt that Yi Yuxuan's numb emotional fluctuations would be more sensitive. Although his dreams were cruel and terrible, Qin Xiu still felt that these dreams had great benefits. As for Yi Yuxuan, he felt that he was hurt in the dream, but it was just a dream. He would be fine when he woke up. Yi Yuxuan glanced at him faintly. He didn't know why this glance was cold and cruel. Qin Xiu took a few steps back. What are you doing? I just complimented Wei Wei, and you're already hating me? Yi Yuxuan shook his head. I'm not such a stingy person. If you just touched her hair, I would want to cut off your hand. Is this stingy? This is a psychopath, a control freak, and a brutal antisocial personality. Yi Yuxuan took out a comb from the bag next to him and slowly combed Wei Wei Bai's hair in the wheelchair. I just had a dream. Qin Xiu looked blank. Did he just sleep? How come he didn't know? Could Yi Yuxuan sleep with his eyes open? It was impossible for others, but Yi Yuxuan, if he suddenly said that he was a god or wanted to destroy the world, he felt that it was possible. Yi Yuxuan. Just now in the car, when I was holding Wei Wei, I dozed off and had a dream. Qin Xiu was a little curious. What did you dream of? Yi Yuxuan was silent for a moment and then slowly said, I dreamed that man. No, I seem to be crazy. Qin Xiu. I think you are crazy in reality, although your craziness is unique. The first time he saw Yi Yuxuan, he saw him sitting indifferently in a chair, reading those particularly profound books. He felt that this child was really crazy. He couldn't understand any of the books he was reading. What was going on? Genius and crazy. But genius. The follow-up to The Abandoned Wife of a Young Marshal in the Republic of China, Li Xinghe took off his hat and sat on the chair. His face was much older and more haggard. In front of him was the agreement. This was a decent piece of paper made by a stray dog. For years. He looked at the man sitting in the chair opposite him in a trance. For years ago, he remembered that it was also winter. She stood at the door of the warehouse, laughing, and then there was an overwhelming snowflake and a roaring fire. The white snowflakes were like paper money to pay tribute to her. During the time when she died, he and Fu Beija stopped the war. Both sides seemed to be discouraged, and there was no trace of fighting spirit. Then, after a year of peace, Fu Beija began to take the initiative to provoke the war. Like a hot knife through butter, he pressed forward, desperately attacking the south. Li Xinghe looked at Fu Beija all the way to victory and sneered. He felt that Fu Beija forgot about Wei Wei Bai, so he was not sad and finally remembered his goal of conquering the world. His ambition had long been eroded by Wei Wei Bai's death. Fu Beija let it go so easily. Fu Beija won. He sat opposite him and watched him sign the contract of forfeiture. After signing the agreement, Li Xinghe closed his eyes and sighed. You can kill me. The man opposite him was dressed in military uniform and did not wear a hat. Under his short black hair was a pair of eyes, cold and bright. His face was still young and handsome, and his attitude was sloppy, like a hooligan. Sign it and get out of the country. After saying that, Fu Beija nimbly took the agreement and waved his hand. I'm leaving. Li Xinghe stood up in shock. You're not going to kill me? Fu Beija had already walked to the door. When the adjutant opened the door, snow flew in from outside. He impatiently waved his hand. In his black eyes, there was a trace of impatience. Of course I want to kill you, but Wei Wei did not let me kill you. I have to let her know that I am a man of my word. Li Xinghe's heart was sour. You actually still remember Wei Wei's words? Fu Beija raised his eyebrows and coldly snorted. It's not like I have amnesia. She was still instructing me yesterday morning. Li Xinghe paused, as if he was struck by lightning. He saw that Fu Beijia had already walked out. The adjutant opened a black umbrella and covered his head. Li Xinghe did not care about anything else and staggered over. Fu Beijia, you're crazy. Wei Wei, she is already. A gun was pointed at Li Xinghe's forehead, and behind that cold black muzzle was Fu Beijia's cold face. His voice was more illusory and cold than the sky full of snow. Li Xinghe, you're jealous that I have her. Li Xinghe stared at him blankly, but he did not know why his heart was sour, and tears came out from his eyes. Wei Wei Bai is dead. Fu Beijia is really crazy. Button at the bottom to record this reading.
There.
Chapter 11-13. When Fu Beijia returned home, the snow had covered the road outside. There was a thick layer of snow, and when he stepped on it, it would make a crunching sound. He frowned in annoyance and quickened his pace. The ringing in his ears started to appear, giving him a splitting headache. When he entered the door, he took off his hat. His short black hair was a little wet, traces of the melting snow. However, he did not feel cold at all. He was just annoyed. He did not know what he was annoyed about. When Fu Beijia opened the door, he paused and suddenly called out softly, Wei Wei. A clear and sweet voice responded from behind the door. Fu Beijia, you're back. She had always called him by his name. She did not respect him as much as other people. But it was so nice that his heart softened and melted. Maybe it was because there was always a hint of sweetness in her voice. This kind of sweetness was addictive. After hearing one sentence from her, he wanted to hear more. He did not even care about what she said. Fu Beijia pushed open the door. His brows were still heavy, but he still walked in. There was a screen inside the door. But suddenly, he found that the screen was placed to one side. A woman was sitting on a chair with her back facing him. She was wearing a light green cheongsam, and she was quite beautiful. Fu Beijia stopped in his tracks, and his eyes turned red. He closed his eyes, and the huge despair in his chest formed an empty sadness. He called out softly again, Wei Wei. The woman said softly, You're back. Fu Beijia was silent. He did not even open his eyes. The woman said, Fu Beijia, where did you go? I waited for you until the food was cold. The voice was right. The tone was also delicate and charming. Even the woman's back looked like her. Fu Beijia really wanted to blind his eyes, ears, and even his brain. Only in this way could he lie to himself. The woman in front of him was his Wei Wei. The woman spoke again. Fu Beijia, bang. A bullet brushed past her ear, and her hair fell off. The woman was stunned for a moment before she suddenly screamed. Her voice was completely different from when she was talking just now. It was sharp and made people feel uncomfortable. Fu Beijia finally opened his eyes again. He raised his hand and raised his gun. The coldness in his eyes gradually grew. His expression was ferocious and terrifying.
Who let you in?
The woman turned around, and her face actually looked a bit like Bai Weiwei. She knelt down in horror. Young Marshal, Before he could finish, a couple behind the screen suddenly appeared and knelt down in fear. Young Marshal, we found her. After all, Madam has passed away. You can't keep using your ventriloquism to miss her. After all, the Fu family still needs descendants. Moreover, this girl was carefully selected. She resembles Madam the most. Fu Beijia looked down at them. This couple was the master of ventriloquism that he had taken Weiwei by to see back then. All these years, every time he had a terrible headache and wanted to kill someone, he would call them over and sit behind the screen. Then, he would imitate Weiwei Bai's voice so that he could have some pitiful peace. He could even write his own lines and scripts. His sweet life with Weiwei after marriage was all written by him. In the end, he even felt that it was not written by him. This was the life that they should live. Li Xinghe said that he was crazy, but he was not. He knew better than anyone else that she was no longer around. But he had to rest. He lived in the torment of losing her 24 hours a day.
The.
Chapter 11:14. He needed at least a little time every day to deceive himself that she was still around. Otherwise, he would not be able to live on. The heavy and excessive longing made him unable to bear the burden. His personality did not allow him to have thoughts of dying. He was a person who wanted to be strong and not cowardly. Even if he died, he would not die cowardly. If he directly committed suicide, he would look down on himself. He had never endured such hardships before. Fu Beige's eyes were so cold that there was no trace of anger. He said, "Get out." The couple immediately got up and walked out. As for the remaining woman, when she saw Fu Beige holding a gun, she also got up in fear and then staggered towards the door. Just as she reached the door, a bullet hit her feet. The woman was so scared that she screamed and immediately ran out. She probably did not dare to look at Fu Beige in the future, looking at the back view that looked like way by. Fu Beige's eyes were terrifyingly cold. He could not help but shoot at the back view. His Wei would not be so timid. She was the woman who braved his bullets to enter the house and become his wife. Fu Beige chased everyone away. He stood there in a daze for a long time before slowly sitting down. The surroundings were terrifyingly quiet. The gorgeous furnishings, tables, and chairs were no different from 4 years ago. He did not change the furnishings. Even the boxes, wardrobes, and jewelry boxes that Wei Bai kept her things were still in the house. The house was clearly filled with her things, but as time passed, in the end, her aura grew faint and distant. Fu Beige took out a cigarette and smoked quietly. In the dense smoke, he seemed to see Wei Bai walking down the stairs. Wearing the moon-white cheongsam that he chose, her calves were extremely beautiful. Step by step, she swayed gracefully down the stairs. Her face was delicate like the magnolia flower by the windowsill. When she smiled, her eyes were beautiful stars. He stared blankly. The pain of the past few years melted in her eyes. Fu Beige did not even dare to make a sound. The rational part of his mind had been abandoned. At this moment, he couldn't bear to disturb himself and shatter these unrealistic fantasies. She walked down the stairs. Her footsteps were slow but far away. Fu Beige watched as she slowly disappeared into thin air. She didn't even make a sound. She was just a phantom left behind in this house. It was more like he had imagined it. Fu Beige took a puff of his cigarette. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his chest and lungs. The sharp pain made him start coughing. He had always been a pragmatic person. He never thought that he would one day be so fantastical. Everyone said that young Master Fu had unique hobbies. Everyone else hired a troupe to perform at home, but he hired a ventriloquist to imitate his dead wife at home. He didn't care about these rumors. But as time passed, even the ventriloquism couldn't calm him down. When he fought, he was much more innocent. Life and death came and went, and his survival instinct made him suppress his longing. But when the war was over, there was no space for him to escape. Fu Beige held back his coughs and smoked. Suddenly, he felt that something was wrong. He touched his face. It was full of tears. Fu Beige pursed his lips. Useless. Useless. He scolded himself.
What was the use of crying?
She wasn't here. Who would feel sorry for him? Fu Beige saw that the window was open and snowflakes were falling. The weather was very cold. He wiped his tears as if nothing had happened and went to close the window. After all, if he didn't close the window when it was cold, the temperature in the house would drop. If it dropped, she would fall sick.
Slash.
Chapter 11:15. Fu Beige suddenly couldn't take it anymore. For the past 4 years, he had tried everything to endure and comfort himself. After a long time, his feelings would fade. He wouldn't feel so bad anymore. But those bastards lied to him. It didn't fade at all. It was still as bright as a knife, stabbing his heart every day. Fu Beige bent over. His straight body was finally crushed. He felt his heart beating violently, and his limbs were cold. In the cold winter weather, his head was covered in cold sweat. Every time he thought of her death, he had this reaction. Fu Beija felt that other people's reactions to opiate withdrawal were not as painful as his. He felt that he was also addicted. He was addicted to her. She was dead, so he could only quit. But this process was too long, and he really couldn't take it anymore. He didn't want to think about her or miss her anymore, especially when he thought of the time he would lose her, which would last a lifetime. This was a man who could face thousands of soldiers and horses on the battlefield and face piles of corpses indifferently. Suddenly, he began to feel afraid. The adjutant knocked on the door and found that no one answered. He was holding an important document in his hand, so he could only push the door open and was about to speak. But he found their young commander standing by the window. His body was almost bent, as if he was in great pain. The adjutant exclaimed, "Young commander." Fu Beija looked up fiercely. His eyes were red, and his violence and despair made people feel fear. The adjutant was frightened. But soon, Fu Beija straightened up again. The violence in his eyes disappeared, leaving behind a cold calmness. He asked, "What's the matter?" The adjutant said, "The news from the south." Fu Beija took the document from his hand expressionlessly. "I'll look at it. There's a meeting tonight. Go and inform the others." The adjutant immediately nodded. "Yes, young commander." The adjutant walked out. The snow made him shrink his neck, and he couldn't help but look back. But he saw Fu Beija standing in the room. He didn't know what he was looking at, but for some reason, he gave off a sad and lonely feeling. The adjutant didn't dare to take a closer look. He could only pretend that he didn't know, and hurriedly left. 3 years later, Li Xinghe, who was in another country, suddenly received an urgent telegram. He carried his simple luggage and boarded the ship back on the same day. After returning home, he rushed straight to the hospital. When he saw the man lying on the bed, he almost couldn't recognize him. His body was so thin that not a single bit of flesh could be seen. His short black hair had also lost its luster, and there were even strands of white hair mixed in. Fu Beija had a lung problem. It was said that it was caused by long-term smoking. Of course, it was also related to his long-term self-abuse lifestyle. Li Xinghe did not know what to feel in his heart. This man who had defeated him was now only one step away from death. Or they could rely on medical equipment to live a little longer, but it would only be torture. Fu Beija did not let his guard down. When he heard the sound of the chair being moved away, he opened his eyes. His eyes were not cloudy at all. Instead, they were terrifyingly calm. Li Xinghe was not afraid of him. He said bluntly, "Why did you ask me to come back? Is it because you feel that you're going to die and I'm living a good life? You're jealous and want to kill me before you die." These 7 years, no one had it easy. All of his feelings had been worn away. After her death, the name Weiwei Bai was like a curse, heavy and tragic. Fu Beija struggled to raise the corners of his mouth. "None of those little brats have the guts. Only you can." Li Xinghe looked at him strangely. Fu Beija pointed to a gun on the table next to him. "Give me a ride." Chapter 11:16. There was no way to recover from this illness, but the hospital could only keep him alive. Because he was too important. Fu Beija did not intend to commit suicide, but he did not want to be served by others in his last days. Li Xinghe knew what he was thinking. After all, if he was the one lying on the hospital bed, he could only shoot himself. This was not because he was afraid of being tortured by treatment, but because of his self-esteem. A person who had been strong all his life would not allow himself to be weak. Fu Beija was stronger than him. Li Xinghe did not take the gun but said calmly, "You can still move your hands. Why don't you end your own life?" Fu Beija's face was sunken, and his eyes were sharper. He said in a hoarse voice, "I can't bear to." Li Xinghe did not understand. "Can't bear to?" Fu Beija said with difficulty. "At first, I couldn't bear to kill myself. I felt that I was very good, and I shouldn't kill myself so easily. No matter how painful it is, I can endure it. Endure, Li Xinghe felt that this was a good word. He was also enduring his life. Fu Beijia said, later on, I couldn't endure it anymore, but I thought that no matter what, this life was saved by her. After I lost her, I was only left with the clothes and accessories that she left behind. After a long time, those things no longer had any trace of her. He was silent for a while before saying, So, I'm the only life left. Since she saved it, then it's hers. He could not bear to destroy her things. Li Xinghe felt that his theory was very strange. But he thought about how he had endured for so many years. If he did not give a reason to continue, he would not have been able to endure for so many years. Fu Beijia gasped for a moment. Of course, there's one last reason. Li Xinghe said, You have so many reasons not to commit suicide. When did Fu Beijia become so wishy-washy? Fu Beijia snorted. That's right. Are you jealous? Li Xinghe frowned. You're already like this. Why would I be jealous? Am I jealous that you're losing weight? All that was left was a skeleton, and it was frightening to look at. Fu Beijia said, Wei Wei likes me. No, she loves me. How can I end my relationship with her so easily? Li Xinghe. Fu Beijia was right to look for him. He really wanted to shoot this thick-skinned bastard. Fu Beijia had already reached the limit of what he could say. His eyes were half closed, and the cold determination in his eyes had disappeared. There was only emptiness. I can't hold on any longer. His words were almost in his mouth. She won't look down on me, right? These words were too hurtful, so careful and lowly. They were so lowly that no flowers could bloom in the dust, only wounds that covered the ground. Li Xinghe didn't say anything, but suddenly smiled. She has never been the kind of woman who looks down on others. She was so nice. Why would she look down on others? After so many years, he thought that he could meet someone similar to her again. But he realized that it was useless no matter how many countries he went to, because he met more beautiful women and interesting souls. None of them could compare to her. Since he met her first, it was useless no matter how good the women were. It was a hopeless truth. Fu Beijia listened to Li Xinghe's insincere words of comfort, and there was a trace of relief on his calm face. After I die, you should accept the things I left behind. This was the first time Li Xinghe saw Fu Beijia speaking to him in such a gentle manner. He picked up the gun from the table and pressed it against Fu Beijia's forehead. It's not your style to talk so much. Go and find her, Fu Beijia. Fu Beijia slowly closed his eyes. A violent gunshot was heard. Blood splattered everywhere, the last color he saw before he died. That red was the same as the day she entered the house, wearing a wedding dress, bright and dazzling. She stood inside the door. She smiled, and her voice was crisp and sweet. I'm yours, Fu Beijia. I'm yours too, Wei Wei Bai. Chapter 11-17. Qin Xiu silently pulled out a few tissues from the paper box next to him, and then sobbed and wiped his tears. Yi Yuxuan's face was calm, indifferent, without any emotional fluctuations. Qin Xiu said, You're too miserable. By the way, what happened to the bad woman who killed your family's Wei Wei? Did you cut her into 1,000 pieces? Yi Yuxuan thought for a moment. I didn't cut her into pieces. She loved her family, so I killed her family one by one, and then let her go to the streets to beg. Qin Xiu. It sounds a bit crazy. This is more terrible than taking someone's life. Qin Xiu looked up and down at the man in front of him again. He was still so cold, still so expressionless to the point of being unreasonable. He wiped his tears. Why are you not touched at all? He heard that he was hurt even in his dreams. Even if Yi Yuxuan was a stone, he would be crushed. How could he still look so calm? When he talked about his dreams before, didn't he sometimes reveal his emotions? To make Yi Yuxuan reveal his emotions, it was generally possible for a fatal blow to happen. Yi Yuxuan saw the blanket on Wei Wei Bai fall down, exposing her shoulders. He reached out and pulled her up again, his voice very calm. I'm used to it. Used to a long period of despair. And then when he opened his eyes, the beauty of returning to her side again. Yi Yuxuan felt that the man in the dream was more miserable, but he was not miserable. Because she was always by his side, even if he kept having such terrible dreams, losing her again and again. But as long as he thought of her waiting for him in reality, what came up in his heart was not the heavy and unsuppressible sadness, but the joy of relief. After experiencing it for a long time, he was able to cope with these unfamiliar emotions that came flooding in. Qin Xiu listened and wiped his nose again. Why does it sound worse? It was not enough to have this kind of dream once. He had it again and again. Moreover, the female lead of these strange dreams was always Wei Wei Bai. Qin Xiu's face was sad, and he said to Yi Yuxuan earnestly, Xian, why don't you and Wei Wei get married? I think your illness is really not light. Men are full of vigor, and it's rare to meet a girl they like. There are perverts who can't suppress their heart. Look at what you've become. Every time, he would dream of a bunch of love and hate stories with Wei Wei Bai. Every time, it was Wei Wei Bai who liked him to death. This was a typical case of things that couldn't be found in reality and could only be found in dreams. Qin Xiu looked at Yi Yuxuan with even more pity. How could he be such an emotionless youth? He had become an unrealistic dreamer. Qin Xiu suddenly felt that being single was pretty good. It was better than dreaming. Yi Yuxuan said indifferently, it's a bit hard to hold it in, but I think if she doesn't like it, I can hold it in until after marriage. Qin Xiu, when will it be after marriage? A few days ago, they were still discussing how to make the engagement party. But as soon as Wei Wei Bai woke up, it fell through. Qin Xiu looked at Yi Yuxuan, and his face became bitter. Yi Yuxuan's heart must be more bitter than his. Otherwise, he wouldn't have such unreliable dreams every day. Yi Yuxuan looked at Wei Wei Bai. She was sleeping quietly with her eyes closed, soft and white. His expression softened, and the calm indifference in his eyes was also stained with warmth. That day will come. I can wait. He had been waiting for her for a long time. So, he didn't lack the experience of waiting. And read the at https://m/sashu.com collections below to record the reading record.
The
Chapter 11:18. Yi Yuxuan suddenly held his breath and saw the eyelashes of the woman in the wheelchair tremble. Then she opened her eyes. Her clear eyes were blank and unguarded, and his figure was reflected in them. Wei Wei Bai blinked and blinked again. His handsome face was right in front of her. She took a deep breath and fell back, only to find that her body hit the back of the chair. She saw that she was sitting in a wheelchair, and there was an intravenous strip in her wrist. Yi Yuxuan. Wei Wei Bai was out of breath. Every time she woke up, it was her and the system. The first time she opened her eyes, it was someone else. Yi Yuxuan looked at her gently, obviously without any expression. But he was surprisingly gentle. You're awake. Bai Weiwei pursed her lips before she breathed a sigh of relief and nodded. I'm awake. Such a mysterious conversation. Qin Xiu looked at this and that in silence. Single dogs don't care about the idea of disbanding a sour and extremely ungrounded couple. These two people looked like they were made for each other. Even their conversations seemed to have a special meaning. Yi Yuxuan reached out and neatly pulled out the needle in her wrist, then pressed the wound with a sterilized cotton pad. He quickly took out an okay bandage and put it on her. The wound was very small, and the bleeding would stop soon after he put it on. He said, Are you hungry? His voice was flat and natural, as if she had only slept for half an hour, and when she woke up, it would be lunchtime. Bai Weiwei cautiously called the system a few times in her mind. The cowardly system didn't dare to say a word. The more pain she experienced, not only did Weiwei Bai's soul begin to become heavier. Yi Yuxuan, the man responsible for providing vitality to Weiwei Bai, also began to slowly awaken some terrible abilities. It was not at the same level as Yi Yuxuan. If Yi Yuxuan had really fully awakened, it would have been crushed by him. Therefore, the system did not dare to make a sound in front of Yi Yuxuan. It was afraid that he would be able to hear its voice like Wei Wei Bai. At that time, the scene would definitely be a bloody hell. It did not dare to take the risk. Wei Wei Bai had also experienced Yi Yuxuan's terrifying ability to observe micro-expressions. She did not dare to call for the system too many times, for fear of being interrogated by Yi Yuxuan again. She took a look at her surroundings. The scenery was picturesque, and the scenery was particularly unique. In the distance, the green hills were covered with maple trees. Nearby, there were gurgling streams. Even the pebbles were soaked in the water. Under the sunlight, the sparkling water looked especially beautiful. Yi Yuxuan asked again patiently, "Do you want to eat something? You eat too much liquid food, so your digestion may not be good, so I prepared some special set meals for you." He had taken over everything that belonged to her. Even Bai Changyan was sent by him to attend a business seminar. Wei Wei Bai had just woken up. In fact, she had no appetite. But under Yi Yuxuan's insistent gaze, she nodded. She nodded, her mind still a little muddled. Why was she here with Yi Yuxuan? Yi Yuxuan asked people to start making lunch. He brought her a paper cup with special warm juice inside. Wei Wei Bai drank the juice and watched Yi Yuxuan, like a nanny, began to busy himself. Although there was an assistant. But without orders, the assistant did not dare to help Yi Yuxuan do anything. Qin Xiu silently nibbled an apple. Suddenly, he heard Wei Wei Bai say, "Where is this?" Qin Xiu finally felt that he was a person, not an invisible person. He had been squatting next to them for so long. These two people looked at him as if he was air. Collection below to record this reading record. Chapter 11:19. Qin Xiu immediately said excitedly, "This is the private forest park in the neighboring city. The scenery is great. Xian brought you here to get some sun." Wei Wei Bai was confused for a moment. Private forest park? It was a park. How could it be private? Was this not contradictory? Qin Xiu did not think so much, no matter how contradictory it was just a name. He said, "This is the Yi family's private property. The few mountains you see, including the stream, are all private property." Wei Wei Bai thought she had seen a lot of things. She grew up in luxury. What kind of wealth had she not enjoyed? But she was wrong compared to Yi Yuxuan. She thought of the biggest garden in her house, which was only a golf course. As for private mountains, private rivers, private parks, she was ignorant. Her house did not have any. Qin Xiu just said a few words before the system dared to speak. Host received 30 days of life points, deducting all kinds of XX costs, mainly system snacks, a total of 15 days. Host has 1,220 days of life points left. External life points can be accommodated for 1,500 days. Wei Wei Bai said, "Now you don't report the details of the life points deducted. Are you pocketing my life points?" The system said, "No, it's because I'm lazy, so I'll just report it briefly. Your pitiful life points are not worth it for me to reach out and steal. Can you not be so proud of your laziness?" Wei Wei Bai said.
"How's Yi Yuxuan?"
He was so calm. Her life points would not always be sucked away by Yi Yuxuan, right? The system said, "No change. Seems like he likes the stable period, that is, he is not excited, but the feelings are still there. If there is no big stimulation, it will always be like this. You can't farm life points, but you won't be sucked away by him." Wei Wei Bai said, "I'm used to the days of lying down to win. If I start to stimulate Yi Yuxuan, I'm not used to it." Previously, when Yi Yuxuan was emotional, she just had to wake up. He didn't have to do anything. Yi Yuxuan's HP was instantly transferred to her. The system said, "Humans need to be stimulated. Even if you like someone, once you've passed that passionate stage, your feelings will definitely become dull." This kind of indifference didn't mean that he didn't like it. It was the body that suppressed the excitement of liking. Let liking become a habit. Habits, on the other hand, didn't need to be controlled by emotions.
It was just an instinctive action.
Love you love to become instinct. It sounds wonderful, doesn't it? But for Wei Wei Bai, Her instincts were too dull. If it was plain, he wouldn't be able to increase his HP. The system said, "That's why you need to give him a sense of crisis. After all, you've already confirmed that he likes you, but he's sure that the two of you will definitely be together. If you don't cause trouble, his emotions won't fluctuate." The system was also trying its best to persuade him. Is it easy? I also need to make a strategy for the host. Wei Wei Bai rubbed her chin, deep in thought. After interacting with each other for such a long time, although Yi Yuxuan's face was paralyzed, he wasn't the kind of crazy robot she had imagined. He was quite good to her. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but say, "Tongzi, there's no emotional blocker in reality. If I'm too serious in following Yi Yuxuan's strategy, I'm afraid that I won't be able to suppress my feelings." She was a human. If she didn't have any special means to deliberately get close to a man she didn't hate, after a while, she would definitely be moved. Download the at https://m/sashu. Kanto facilitate your next reading. You can click on the button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 1120. Acting required emotions, and there was no cheat to remove them. She would fall into it sooner or later. The system said, "Everything is risky. How can you succeed if you don't take risks?" Wei Wei Bai shook her head. "Actually, there's a more important reason why I don't want to get too close to Yi Yuxuan." The system asked, "What's the reason?" Wei Wei Bai said, "Yi Yuxuan is too handsome. When I look at his face, my heart starts to beat faster." She looked up and saw that Yi Yuxuan had already spread out the picnic cloth with all kinds of beautiful food on it. It looked like a proper suburban trip. The sunlight from the treetops fell into his black hair, and his beautiful and indifferent eyes had a bit of light. Clean and cold handsome, it made people wonder how this face could be so perfect. Wei Wei Bai said, "It's not good for a man to be too handsome. Isn't that a crime?" The system said, "Wake up. Men are dangerous. You have to wake up and treat him like pork belly. It's just 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth. What's so good about it?" Wei Wei Bai said, "Pork belly is delicious too." The system was speechless. The host was done for. She was seduced by Yi Yuxuan. Wei Wei Bai drooled for 3 seconds, then finally put away those unrealistic thoughts. "All right, I can't like it too plain. I need some excitement." The system? ? Wei Wei Bai calculated with a gloomy face. "I think Yi Yuxuan is too trusting of me. That's why he's not excited. I'll just let him feel a sense of crisis." The system. "Host, you change your face too quickly. Are you afraid you'll be tempted?" Wei Wei Bai punched her palm and looked to the side. Finally, she saw Qin Xiu, who was eating an apple with his head down like a hamster.
Qin Xiu was not a top-notch handsome guy.
But he was still handsome, his eyes were eyes, and his eyebrows were eyebrows. If it wasn't for the fact that Yi Yuxuan's cheat-like face always overshadowed her. Qin Xiu was also a handsome guy. And although Qin Xiu was a generation older than Yi Yuxuan, however, she was only 4 or 5 years older than Yi Yuxuan. Qin Xiu, who was eating the apple, suddenly felt a chill. He looked up and saw Wei Wei Bai looking at him with gloomy eyes. It felt like the big wild wolf had taken a fancy to the little Blue Riding Hood. He was terrified. What was going on? Could it be that the way he ate the apple was wrong? Wei Wei Bai suddenly reached out and put her hand on Qin Xiu's shoulder. "Brother Xiu, do you have a girlfriend?" Qin Xiu's face turned pale. His head was stiff. He twisted his neck and looked at Wei Wei Bai's beautiful white hand on his shoulder. On his shoulder. Qin Xiu looked at Yi Yuxuan in horror. Yi Yuxuan had just finished arranging the picnic cloth and stood up. His eyes coincidentally fell on Wei Wei Bai's hand, and then on Qin Xiu's shoulder. Qin Xiu's mind echoed. If he touched her hair, she would cut off his hand. Now it was Wei Wei Bai who touched his shoulder. Yi Yuxuan wouldn't cut off his shoulder, right? Qin Xiu trembled and said, No one would like me. I'm unreliable, poor and useless. No woman liked me since I was a child. With such a self-deprecation, he should be safe. But the next second he saw an even more horrifying scene. Wei Wei Bai showed a bright and beautiful smile. I like Brother Chiu, such a pure and good man. Qin Chiu suddenly felt that the heavens wanted him dead. Lightning struck him and left him devastated. Wei Wei Bai. In fact, I like doctors since I was a child. A handsome and famous young doctor like Brother Chiu is very close to the man I look forward to. Qin Chiu felt that his picture was already hanging on the tombstone.
He was going to die.
His desire to survive made him struggle, and he retreated in panic. No, I'm a quack. I killed a lot of people. Every day there are patients who want to stab me with a knife. Handsome, because I had plastic surgery. Who said I'm young? In fact, I'm 72 years old. I look young because I'm wearing a human skin mask. The man you look forward to has nothing to do with me. I'm not clean at all. I have AIDS. To survive, he used up his life to self-deprecate. Qin Chiu screamed all the way, and his footsteps quickly left the terrible murder scene. The system secretly said his life value increased by 30 days. Jealousy made Yi Yuxuan desperately give him life value. Yi Yuxuan stood next to the picnic cloth. His face was very calm as he looked at Wei Wei Bai. Only his eyes were burning a bit. Although Wei Wei Bai's legs were not disabled, she could still stand up. But for a moment, under his eyes, her legs were soft. Yi Yuxuan slowly walked over, his hands on both sides of her chair. He leaned over, the shadow on his face. There was a kind of shaking coldness. Is it fun? He knew she was doing it deliberately. Deliberately provoking Qin Chiu, and deliberately lying. But clearly he knew, why did his heart still unbearably fluctuate? Wei Wei Bai was as innocent as a little goblin. I'm just making small talk. Yi Yuxuan said lightly. You also make small talk with me. Wei Wei Bai's eyes changed, and she was indescribably clingy. Then she slowly reached out and put her hand on Yi Yuxuan's shoulder.
Yi Yuxuan.
Yi Yuxuan was indifferent.
Yes.
I'm hungry. Yi Yuxuan. Then he bent down in resignation, picked her up, and walked towards the picnic cloth. If you're hungry, you have to eat. Otherwise, your stomach will not be good. Yi Yuxuan silently thought. Titha? You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.